Chapter 1774. Just as he was about to walk toward her, there was a knock on the door. Yun Shishir looked over curiously, thinking that it was the designer outside. In the end, the door was opened from the outside before she could let him in. Xiang Yu's chattering voice reached their ears. Shishir. Are you there? I heard from them that you're in this room. Hearing this, Yun Shishir's brows furrowed tightly. She knew who had come. Xiang Yu, Yun Qingmiao, and Yun Shishir arrived at the castle in a car right after they got off the plane. After the butler settled the three of them down, Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli went into a frenzy. They were still guessing where Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja's wedding would be held. They thought that Yun Shishir's wedding would be held in a romantic place like Bali, Sanya, or the Sea of Love. After they got off the plane, they thought that the hotel was arranged for them. However, when they heard that the destination was a private island, they did not get it until they got off the plane and were sent to the castle. The sisters were utterly shocked. A castle? A castle built on a private island? They stood at the castle's entrance and looked up at the majestic, palace-like retro castle. From afar, it was noble and gorgeous, filled with the classical style of medieval European royalty. At first, they were still in disbelief and convulsion. It was only when the butler welcomed them in that they dared to believe what was happening before their eyes. Oh, God! How rich is Yun Shishir's fiancé? To be able to own his own castle on a private island, he must be worth at least hundreds of millions of yuan. They heard that there were exclusive helicopters and luxury yachts on the island. How could they not be shocked when these luxuries, which they had only seen on the news, appeared before their eyes in real life? Does all of this belong to Mu Yaja? In that case, all of this will belong to Yun Shishir in the future, too. Oh, God! Oh, God! For a moment, too many exclamations came to their minds. Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli toured the castle excitedly as if they were looking at a work of art. They could not hide the surprise on their faces. There was no need to mention how envious the sisters were of Yun Shishir. Which girl didn't dream of having a castle of their own? However, all of this could only be imagined. Who would have thought that Yun Shishir would have everything so real? Yun Qingmiao, in particular, was so jealous that her eyes were red. She wanted it too. She wanted a private jet, a private castle, a yacht, and a beach. She wanted everything she could see. Vanity was like a germ, quickly spreading and occupying one's heart. When they opened the door and saw Yun Shishir in a luxurious and elegant gown, the three of them were stunned. Then, they surrounded her with envy. When they passed through the arched door, Xiang Yu saw Mu Yaja. She was startled for a moment, then her lips curled into a warm smile. Little Mu. You're here too. Because of the angle just now, he didn't see him immediately. Upon seeing Mu Yaja, Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli exchanged glances and smiled sweetly. Brother Mu. Brother-in-law-to-be. Mu Yaja only gave a low hum of acknowledgement, but the smile on his face quickly faded and became a little colder. Chapter 1775. Yes. We just arrived. We heard that you're here, so we rushed over to see you. Xiang Yu's smile was incomparably affectionate, and there was a fawning look in her eyes as if she was trying to get close to her. Yun Shishir, however, asked awkwardly, "Why didn't you knock before coming in?" This question stumped Xiang Yu. Yun Qingmiao grinned and said, "The door isn't locked, so we pushed it open and came in." Did we disturb you? The door was not locked, so they pushed it open and came in. Wasn't this reason a little too pompous? This room was her personal space, after all. How could they enter without knocking or asking for permission? Knocking on the door was out of courtesy, and they could only enter after asking if it was convenient. Yun Shishir smiled and asked, "Since you just arrived, did the butler arrange a room for you?" "Yes. It's just that the room is a little small," answered Xiang Yu. Small? Yun Shishir glanced at Mu Yaja with a puzzled look. Yun Qinli, who was beside her, said, "Oh, it's not small. It's just that it's a little cramped for 3 people." Mu Yaja said, the butler may have been negligent. I'll arrange another room for you right away. Xiang Yu, however, said politely, hey, it's fine. Don't be so busy. Let Auntie take a look at you. As she spoke, she walked toward Yun Shishir, held her shoulders, and sized her up. Oh, my. This dress is so pretty. The material is so good. You must have spent a lot on it, right? Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli came over as well, looking at her dress with envy and yearning in their eyes. Sister Shishir, is this the dress you wore for your engagement? It's so beautiful. The red dress is so festive. More importantly, this dress looks especially elegant on Shishir. Shishir, you're so beautiful, just like a princess. Yun Qingmiao continued to bewitch her, too, so much so that Yun Shishir could not get used to their competing praises for a while. What's going on? Why was he suddenly so enthusiastic towards her? Yun Shishir was confused for a moment and looked at them in a daze. Seeing her in a daze, Xiang Yu covered her mouth and laughed, look, Shishir is shy. Yun Qingmiao immediately retorted, Shishir, you're a bride-to-be, how can you be shy? But look, Qinli, Shishir and Brother Mu look so good together. Yun Qinli smiled and said, what Brother Mu? Sister, you should change the way you address him. You should call him future brother-in-law. Yun Shishir was a little overwhelmed. What was going on? 2 days ago, they were still saying a few words of jealousy to her from time to time. Why did their attitude change completely today? Yun Qingmiao, who was secretly sizing up Mu Yaja, could not help blushing. The man in front of her was dressed in a well-tailored suit. His black hair was styled with mousse, which made him look even more dashing and handsome. His deep-set eyes were as mesmerizing as the stars, dark and endless. However, when he swept a glance over, his arrogant and cold gaze made her heart skip a beat. No woman would be able to resist his charm if they stood before him. Chapter 1776. He could not help but frown. With just a glance, he knew what she was shy about. Yun Shishir also noticed her sister's gaze on Mu Yaja. Her brows knitted together in slight displeasure. Xiang Yu was still enthusiastically talking about something, but at the same time, her tone was secretly trying to find out more information. Shishir. I still don't know what Xiao Mu's job is. As she spoke, she suddenly pulled her to the side by the arm and asked enviously, is Xiao Mu's family especially rich? I was shocked when I saw that he had a private jet and a castle yacht. At first, I thought that he was just an ordinary white-collar worker, but now, it seems that he's not that simple. Yun Qingmiao pretended to ask casually, Shishir, what's the background of our future brother-in-law? You haven't told us about him. Is it because you don't treat us as your family? Xiang Yu quickly chimed in, that's right. Tell us, and we'll give you a reference to check him out. Yun Shishir frowned and glanced at Mu Yaja, only to see him standing there and patiently talking to Yun Qinli. Yun Qinli was like a happy little bird as she circled around Mu Yaja, looking at him with adoration and asking questions from time to time. Yun Shishir retracted her gaze and replied slowly, him. He's an employee of the Mu Group. This was what Mu Yaja had said to her classmates during their class reunions. A CEO was also a type of employee, so she was just being more reserved in her words. Mu Group. Employee. Xiang Yu was surprised to hear that. She had never heard of the Mu Group. She had never come into contact with the business world, so she did not know what kind of status the Mu Group had in the business world. An employee, though, it did not look like one, right? How could an ordinary employee afford a private jet and such a huge island of the dead? Shishir, are you hiding it from me, or are you also kept in the dark? He doesn't look like a company employee at all. I think he must be a rich second-generation heir with a net worth of billions. Otherwise, how could an engagement ceremony be so extravagant? As soon as Xiang Yu finished speaking, Mu Yaja seemed to have heard her voice and walked towards them. He walked forward and put his arm around Yun Shishir's shoulders in a very natural manner. He smiled politely and said, this is not a big deal. Shishir and I only have one engagement ceremony in our lives. Naturally, we have to make it grand. When Xiang Yu saw Mu Yaja walking over, she was startled. She was afraid that he had heard her words. However, when she saw that he was polite and didn't seem to be angry, she felt relieved. Xiao Mu, you haven't introduced yourself yet. Since you are Shishir's fiancé, as Shishir's aunt, and Shishir is my only niece, I have to check on her. Our Shishir is gentle and virtuous. Since you've decided to marry her, then you should take a look. Since she's already your fiancé, then it's my responsibility as an aunt to inquire about your family's situation. These words were said in an extremely dignified manner. Xiang Yu just wanted to see what kind of family Mu Yaja was from. She was just being vain. Chapter 1777. Check. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows and quickly understood her intentions. Yun Shishir was a little angry when she heard Xiang Yu's words. What did she mean by being her aunt and checking for her? What right did she have to check for her? What did it have to do with her, who she was marrying, the status of the person she was marrying, and his family background? Could it be that when she got married, she had to know everything about the person she was going to marry? Regardless of whether he was rich or poor, she had her eyes on this man and wanted to spend the rest of her life with him. If she said that, it would make others misunderstand that she chose to be with Mu Yaja because of his family background. Yun Shishir was so angry that her face flushed red. Her face, which was originally covered in rouge, was now even redder. Mu Yaja lowered his head to look at her and knew that she was a little unhappy. Hence, he said, Shishir is my fiancée and the wife that I have decided to be with for the rest of my life. There is no doubt about my feelings for her. Of course, the so-called sincerity is not something that can be proven with empty words. I will only say that regardless of whether I am rich or poor, even if I have to give up everything, I will not let her suffer. Moreover, the so-called power, wealth, and status are never eternal. But my sincerity towards her will never change in this lifetime. His voice was deep and mellow, with a charming magnetism. His words were not to be refuted. Xiang Yu was stunned. His sincere confession was so deep and sincere that it indirectly refuted her words. Instead, it made her words seem even more pretentious. Who was Mu Yaja? He had been on the battlefield for a long time and had traveled through bloody battles. He had seen many schemes and schemes. No matter who it was, what they were thinking, or what they were thinking, he could see through it all with just one look. How could Xiang Yu's narrow-mindedness escape his eyes? With just a few words, she had no choice but to shut up. His invisible and imposing aura made her feel a little light-headed and light-footed. This man's aura was not ordinary. His words were overbearing, making people have no choice but to submit to him. Xiang Yu smiled awkwardly and nodded, that's right. What power? What wealth? It's all fake. Only sincerity was real. The most important thing is that you care about Shishir and the two of you are happy together. It's good that you understand. Mu Yaja paused for a moment, then said in a deep voice, now, I'm going to bring Shishir to meet a few of my important guests. Please return to your room. If you need anything, just instruct the housekeeper. Don't go out and walk around as much as possible. Be careful not to get lost. With that, he hugged Shishir and left the room without looking back. Xiang Yu was momentarily stunned by his domineering declaration. She stood rooted to the ground, unable to recover her senses for a long time. Yun Qingmiao, who was behind her, was more observant. She could vaguely detect a hint of mockery in Mu Yaja's words. Her face turned pale as she tugged at her mother's clothes. Mom, what you said just now was too straightforward. People will think that we haven't seen the world. Humph. This brat clearly doesn't put me, his aunt, in his eyes. After Xiang Yu came back to her senses, she was clearly very angry. Chapter 1778. She should be thankful that she was Yun Shishir's aunt. Even if she were to spend her entire life like this, it would be impossible for her to stand before Mu Yaja and let him take a look at her. Having said that, Xiang Yu couldn't say anything else. The three of them could only return to their room resentfully. However, just as Mu Yaja had expected, they really got lost in the huge castle. Helpless, they could only ask the butler to bring them back to their room awkwardly. Along the way, Yun Shishir was still puzzled. She didn't know who this man was bringing her to see. It wasn't until they arrived at the reception room that she saw Lu Jinyu sitting on the sofa and smoking a cigarette that she suddenly realized what was going on. The moment Lu Jinyu saw Mu Yaja push open the door and enter, he saw the woman in his arms. He immediately stood up and greeted with a smile, "Chief, sister-in-law." Yun Shishir smiled at him politely. She had a better impression of him after he helped her at the hospital last time. However, facing the lingering smoke in the reception room, she still frowned uncomfortably and waved her hands slightly. She actually didn't like the smell of cigarettes. It was very suffocating. However, Lu Jinyu knew how to read people's expressions. Seeing that she seemed to be a little disgusted by the smell of cigarettes, he immediately put out the cigarette in his hand in the ashtray. Yun Shishir was touched by his action. He knew how to take a woman's feelings into consideration. This man should be an elegant gentleman with good etiquette. There were three other unfamiliar men sitting in the reception room. They also stood up behind Lu Jinyu and greeted Mu Yaja, "Boss." One of the handsome men, who looked slightly younger, looked at Yun Shishir with a hint of surprise in his eyes. However, more than that, he couldn't hide his amazement. This must be sister-in-law. Yun Shishir smiled politely. "Hello." Mu Yaja said, "Let me introduce you. This is your sister-in-law, my fiancée. From now on, all of you should follow Jinyu and call her sister-in-law." When everyone heard this, they first glanced at Yun Shishir and smiled at each other. Then, they said in unison, "Hello, sister-in-law." Yun Shishir did not know whether to laugh or cry at such a situation. "They are. You didn't even introduce them to me." Yun Shishir secretly rebuked. Mu Yaja introduced Lu Jinyu. "You should have met this man before. Lu Jinyu is in charge of all the affairs of the corporation under me. He's very capable." Lu Jinyu smiled and said, "Sister-in-law, we met a few days ago. You should still remember me." Yun Shishir pretended to be confused and said, I don't remember." Lu Jinyu turned pale with fright. "No way. Sister-in-law, it's only been 2 days and you've already forgotten about me?" After saying that, he couldn't hide the disappointment and sadness on his face. Yun Shishir giggled, but she was a little shy. "I'm just kidding. It's all thanks to your help at the hospital that day. How could I forget?" Lu Jinyu was stunned, but he laughed out loud. His sister-in-law was really cute sometimes. This is Jiangshen. Don't be fooled by his baby face. He's actually 27 years old. Mu Yaja introduced the man who looked exceptionally young and tender. Jiangshen immediately protested, "Boss. You can't do this. I'm only 18 years old." Chapter 1779. Judging from his appearance, she had thought that he was underage. It turned out that he was only 1 year younger than Mu Yaja. Mu Yaja then proceeded to introduce the rest of the team members. They were all his right-hand men, who were in charge of all the affairs of the Xinyu Financial Group. For example, Jiang Shen looked young, but he was the financial director of the Xinyu Financial Group and firmly controlled the financial power. Another was Pei Xiaoyu, the public relations director of the Xinyu Financial Group. He was about 25 or 26 years old and looked gentle and refined. The last was a slightly older man, Jing Cheng. The four of them were also attending the engagement party as Mu Yaja's brothers. After Mu Yaja's introduction, the four men immediately gave Yun Shishir a friendly and respectful smile. The four of them addressed her as sister-in-law, but Yun Shishir was a little at a loss. She blushed slightly. This was the first time she was facing Mu Yaja's brothers, so she couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. However, after interacting with each other, they were all experts in EQ. After laughing and chatting, they easily dispelled the awkward atmosphere. They all had a close and friendly attitude towards Yun Shishir. After all, she was Mu Yaja's fiancée, so they naturally liked her. Jiang Shen even circled Yun Shishir twice and sighed in amazement. You're indeed the woman that boss likes. Sister-in-law, you're really elegant. This is the gown that you'll wear at the engagement party, right? Oh, sister-in-law, you're so beautiful in it. You're just like a fairy. Lu Jinyu joked, Jiang Shen, don't mess around. Boss is still standing here. Don't be fooled by boss's usual behavior. He's actually a big vinegar jar. If you get too close to him, he'll be jealous. Jiang Shen was slightly surprised. Then, he immediately kept a distance from Yun Shishir. Boss, don't misunderstand. I don't have any feelings for sister-in-law. Lu Jinyu said, Jiang Shen, you didn't see that last time. I just helped sister-in-law up. His gaze almost killed me on the spot. If looks could kill, I would have died a long time ago. When everyone heard this, they burst into laughter again. The atmosphere in the reception room quickly livened up. It seems that after getting married, boss must be a slave to his wife. He'll listen to his wife. I'm afraid that we won't have any status in the future. Lu Jinyu sighed and shook his head as he said this. Mu Yaja shot him a look, and he immediately shut his mouth, not daring to say another word. Jiang Shen, who was standing at the side, said coolly, Jinyu, be careful with your words and actions. You'd better be careful with your words. Boss is very vengeful. If you offend him, you might lose your year-end bonus this year. Lu Jinyu immediately said pitifully, no. Boss, you'd better not to be a problem boss. I'm still hoping to earn some money and find a wife in the future. You have a wife, but the rest of us are still single. You mustn't make things difficult for us. Everyone burst into laughter again. Yun Shishir realized that when he was with them, Mu Yaja's face was not as cold as usual. Instead, he had a warm smile on his face. He did not feel much disgust when he saw his brothers making fun of him. In the Mu group, he had always been a man of his word. He gave people a feeling that he was very unapproachable. Chapter 1780. As his left and right arms, the four of them were all young and capable. Mu Yaja had taken a fancy to their character and talent, so he recruited them. From the establishment of the Xingyu Financial Group until now, the five of them had gone through storms together. It could be said that they had many years of revolutionary feelings and had long cultivated a tacit understanding that was as close as brothers. With just a glance, they could understand each other tacitly. Lu Jinyu suddenly asked, Boss, didn't the two young masters come? Mu Yaja looked at her. Yun Shishir immediately explained, they got off the plane and are a little tired, so they're resting in their room for a while. You'll see them tomorrow. The children are still young. After such a long journey, they must be tired. They should rest, Jiang Shen said. As he spoke, he suddenly presented a treasure. Sister-in-law, I've specially prepared a mysterious gift for you at this engagement banquet. Yun Shishir was a little curious. What gift? You'll be able to see it tomorrow. Wait and see. You'll definitely like it. Jiang Shen was smug and obviously very confident. Lu Jinyu mercilessly undermined him. If sister-in-law doesn't like it, you'll be embarrassed. It's better than you. You came empty-handed. How can you have the nerve to criticize me? What do you mean I came empty-handed? I've prepared a big red packet for sister-in-law this time. Jiang Shen ruthlessly disdained. How tacky. Lu Jinyu instantly felt hurt and looked at Yun Shishir pitifully. Yun Shishir saved the situation. I don't think it's tacky. It's a big red packet. How big is it? See? Sister-in-law likes it. As he spoke, Lu Jinyu smiled mysteriously and winked at Yun Shishir. It's a very big red packet. You'll know when you count it. Yun Shishir smiled and did not take his words to heart. Still, it was true that she was shocked by Lu Jinyu's handiwork afterward. She thought that the so-called big red packet would be at most 6 figures, which was already impressive. And the result? Lu Jinyu, on the other hand, had prepared a total of 7 figures in red packets. Most of them were treasured currencies from various countries. There were several large gift boxes. Yun Shishir counted them so many that her hands were about to cramp. Yun Shishir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Was this guy going to give her all his savings in a red packet? Of course, this was all in the future. After returning to her room from the reception room, Yun Shishir had dinner and decided to rest early. Tomorrow was the engagement party. She was nervous and slightly excited. She suddenly thought of something. She turned on the desk lamp and dialed Gong Jie's number. However, the number she dialed was not within the service area. Her heart suddenly felt a little gloomy. An indescribable desolation appeared on his face. Did he turn off his phone? Or was he purposely avoiding her? Was he still unwilling to attend her engagement party? When he thought of this, what followed was a huge disappointment. Perhaps she shouldn't have forced him to be there. It might not be a bad thing if he didn't come. After all, Gong Jie's hatred for the Mu family was already in his bones and blood. It was difficult to get rid of it. He did not strongly oppose her marriage to Mu Yaja, which was already the greatest satisfaction he could give her. Chapter 1781. The next morning, the stylist brought the perfectly ironed gown into the bedroom early in the morning, along with many bags of makeup. After washing up, it was time for more than an hour to put on makeup. The engagement party was divided into 2 parts. One was the engagement ceremony, and the other was a bonfire banquet. Thus, the stylist prepared 2 sets of gowns for her. The venue's makeup was done. The azure sea and the clear blue sky reflected each other. From afar, they formed a line. Above the clouds, a rainbow was faintly discernible. At a glance, it was as beautiful as a rainbow bridge. Seagulls hovered close to the sea's surface. A gentle breeze blew, and on the white beach was a fresh arch made of roses. These roses were picked when they were at their brightest. They were made into bouquets and flown in overnight. In the early morning, the servants put them on the arched door. The fresh and tender petals were still stained with transparent dewdrops. In front of the arch, there was a carpet of fresh flowers. Red, yellow, and purple were all blooming together. More than 100 seats were set up in the venue. In the center of the venue, 5 long buffet tables were set up. The kitchen had already started cooking desserts. In order to satisfy the needs of different guests, the flavors and ingredients were the freshest and most diverse. A fleet of BMWs was parked at the castle's entrance. Of course, the so-called fleet of BMWs did not refer to BMW cars. Instead, it was a fleet of snow-white horses. Just like in a fairy tale, everything was unbelievably beautiful. The guests who had arrived the day before were already awake. Some ran to the beach to enjoy the morning sea breeze after breakfast. Some were curious and wanted to see the venue's setting, but they were politely asked to leave by the venue's security personnel. Yun Qingmiao, on the other hand, was lucky enough to catch a glimpse of the engagement party's setting. Jealousy filled her heart. How did Yun Shishir manage to hook up with such a powerful husband? It's just an engagement party. It's not even a formal wedding. Why did they spend so much money on it? They even lied to us by saying that he's a company employee. Who are they kidding? As he thought about it, his heart felt twisted. He felt that this kind of life was too unfair. After Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen woke up, they ran to Yun Shishir's room. They had fallen asleep on the plane yesterday and were carried off the plane by the bodyguards. As a result, she missed the moment when Yun Shishir tried on the gown and missed the chance to see how beautiful her mother looked in the gown. Therefore, she hurried over early in the morning to inquire about it out of curiosity. The 2 little guys pushed the door open. In the huge princess room, the morning sun shone through the window. Yun Shishir stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. At this moment, she had already changed into a formal dress. She was like a blooming rose, making people unable to take their eyes off her. Xiao Yichen was stunned. He stared at her with his big, watery eyes without blinking. Yu Yu glanced at him and felt sorry for him. She kindly raised her hand to close his jaw that was about to dislocate. Xiao Yichen was still so shocked that he could not speak. He had never seen his mother look so beautiful. She was wearing a rose-colored gown and looked like a fresh flower. It was the most beautiful moment. Yu Yu waved her hand in front of his eyes. Hello. Mui Chen, are you stupid? Chapter 1782. Yun Shishir was admiring the scenery of the beach through the window. The pure white beach, the circling seagulls, and the gentle sound of the waves crashing against the beach. Everything was so beautiful. The morning breeze by the beach blew in their faces, but they did not feel cold at all. Yu Yu waved his hand in front of his eyes. Hey! Mui Chen, are you dumb? Xiao Yichen slapped away Yu Yu's hand that was blocking his view. He ran excitedly towards Yun Shishir and hugged her from behind. Mommy! Yun Shishir was stunned. When she came back to her senses, she turned slightly and placed her hand gently on Xiao Yichen's shoulder. She smiled. Baby, you're awake. Xiao Yichen nodded his head vigorously and praised, Mommy is so beautiful. You look like a fairy. In the future, Mommy will wear such a beautiful dress every day, okay? Yun Shishir was amused by his innocent words. She raised her eyebrows and squatted down slightly so that she was at his eye level. She did not know whether to laugh or cry. How can I wear this dress every day? Yu Yu walked over and said helplessly, this guy was stunned when he stood at the door just now. But Mommy, you look really good in this dress. Suddenly, he could not help but say viciously, maybe Mommy doesn't care about her appearance normally and doesn't pay attention to her appearance. That's why you look as beautiful as a fairy when you dress up. This was why Mui Chen was taken aback by the disparity in his heart. Yun Shishir did not know whether to laugh or cry at his words. She pretended to be sad and said, Yu Yu, do you have to be so mean to Mommy? Xiao Yichen giggled and said, Yu Yu has such a vicious mouth. Mommy, teach him a lesson. Yu Yu glanced at him coldly and smacked him on the head. You're the one who's asking for a beating. Feeling aggrieved, little Yichen hugged his injured head and glared at him with a pitiful expression. Yun Shishir immediately said, Yu Yu, don't bully your brother. Mommy, he's the one who bullied me. Yu Yu looked aggrieved. When it came to acting innocent, he was an experienced veteran. When Yun Shishir saw his pitiful expression, she couldn't bear to scold him. Mui Chen retorted innocently, when did I bully you? It's clear that you've been bullying me more. You still have the nerve to ask me? Last night, you slept so restlessly. You kicked the blanket and hugged me like a bear. I didn't rest well the whole night. I was almost paralyzed by you. After Yu Yu finished speaking, Mui Chen immediately looked guilty. All right. Both of you, stop fooling around, okay? Mui Chen nodded and said, okay. Today is Mommy's engagement party. Xiao Yichen, you have to be good. Yu Yu ignored him and walked in front of Yun Shishir. Yun Shishir was squatting down so that they were at eye level. Mommy, Yu Yu gazed longingly at his mother's face, which was as beautiful as a flower. His eyes lingered on every inch of her face until they finally landed on her slightly slanted shoulder strap. He raised a brow, but with a gentle smile, he reached out his little hand and carefully adjusted the strap for her. He lowered his long eyelashes and the tenderness in his eyes made Yun Shishir's heart melt. Mommy, you're already 24 years old. Why are you still so careless? The shoulder strap is crooked. It won't be pretty anymore. Chapter 1783. As Yu Yu tidied himself up seriously, his pink lips curved into a delicate smile. Yun Shishir stared at him in a daze. For a moment, she even held her breath, unwilling to let her heavy breathing disturb the tranquil warmth of this moment. This morning, Yu Yu got out of bed and dressed himself. He tidied up his clothes, from suspenders to a small suit to a black bow tie. He looked like a noble little gentleman, noble, elegant, and courteous. He was especially attentive. He even pinned a particularly beautiful crystal brooch in the pocket of his suit. It was obvious that he attached great importance to this special day. Yu Yu was very particular about his appearance. He usually paid attention to his clothes, but today, he dressed himself up to look especially handsome. As she looked at him, it was as if she could imagine that in 10 years, this little guy would definitely be like his father, a handsome and elegant young master. As he lowered his eyes, his long and thick eyelashes cast a deep shadow on his eyelids, making his gaze deep and charming. How time flies. As Yu Yu smiled, he looked up at her with a pair of clear eyes. In the blink of an eye, my mommy is actually married. Yun Shishir didn't know whether to laugh or cry at his old-fashioned tone. She deliberately teased him. Yu Yu, why are you so old at such a young age? When you speak, you're as mature as a little old man. Those who don't know better would think that you're marrying off a daughter. It's not certain whether I'll have a daughter in the future. But I only have one mommy. I definitely can't bear to marry her off. For as long as he could remember, he and his mommy depended on each other. He originally thought that this kind of life would last for a long time. He even imagined that in the future, he and his mommy would depend on each other for survival until the end. He admitted that he was a mommy's boy. After all, in his life, Yun Shishir occupied the most important position. From the time he learned how to walk, eat, go to school by himself, and take care of himself, he worked hard for everything because he wanted his mommy to live the happiest life. At that time, he thought that since he didn't have a daddy and his mommy was so lonely, he must accompany her to the end. He was the only man in mommy's life. Therefore, he saw loving her and taking care of her as his most important mission, and it was his duty to do so. He did not feel that this was a burden. Instead, he enjoyed this responsibility and mission. However, on this day, his mission had probably been handed over to Mu Yaja like a baton being handed over. He felt happy and blissful, but he was also reluctant to part with her. He was happy because mommy finally had her own happiness. In the future, she would no longer be alone and would no longer be lonely. He was reluctant because after handing over this mission, he felt an indescribable sense of emptiness in his heart. His feelings for Yun Shishir were complicated and uneasy, generous and selfish. Yun Shishir saw that there were some complicated emotions in his expression. He seemed lonely, happy, and worried. For a moment, she couldn't figure out what this child was thinking in his heart at that moment. She smiled softly and gently placed her hand on the back of his hand. Yu Yu suddenly turned his hand over to hold hers. Chapter 1784. Yu Yu smiled and said, "Mommy, you love Daddy. But what I want to tell you now is that even though you'll grow old and I'll grow up, my heart will always be with you. Right now, I'm handing you over to Daddy because I believe that he'll be able to give you happiness and take on the responsibilities of a husband. But if he bullies you, feel free to tell me. If he lets you down, I won't hesitate to take you back from Daddy even if I have to give it my all. Do you understand?" For some reason, Yun Shishir felt an inexplicable bitterness in her heart when he said those words with such deep emotion. How could her Yu Yu be so sensible? For a 7-year-old child to say such words, it was not something that should be said at his age. Yun Shishir pulled him into her embrace and smiled. "All right, Yu Yu, Mommy will definitely be happy." Xiao Yichen suddenly stood aside and felt touched for a moment. Perhaps he could not fully understand Yu Yu's current state of mind. If it was in the past, he would definitely think that it was just an engagement. After the wedding, the four of them would become a family and truly be together. This should be something to be happy about, shouldn't it? But now, he did not think so anymore. After spending so much time together, he truly understood the close bond between Yu Yu and Mommy. It was a bond that was thicker than blood. These 7 years were neither long nor short, but they had experienced countless emotions and drifted through wind and rain. It was precisely because of this bond that Yu Yu was worried that Mommy would not be happy. That was why he felt uneasy. Just like those fathers who married off their daughters, the atmosphere at the wedding was clearly so happy, but when they handed their daughters' hands to the young man, they felt reluctant, uneasy, nervous, relieved, worried, touched, all kinds of feelings, all kinds of feelings, all kinds of feelings, all kinds of feelings. As if they were telepathic, Xiao Yichen could even vaguely feel Yu Yu's reluctance. He could empathize with him. Yu Yu said seriously, "Mommy, you must be happy. Otherwise, he would definitely regret his decision." He regretted handing her over to his father. Yun Shishir gently caressed his palm-sized handsome face and nodded with a smile. However, her eyes were faintly moist. She tried her best to hold back the sourness in her heart. At 11:30 a.m., the guests entered the venue one after another. Everyone entered the venue and sat in their seats, chatting and laughing. Today was a good day. This island was located in a semi-tropical zone and was warm all year round. Bathing in the fresh sea breeze and feeling the embrace of the blue sky and the sea, one could not help but feel carefree. At the main venue of the wedding, many children of the VIPs were smiling and taking photos in front of the arch decorated with flowers. Most children liked beautiful things. Some of the children who loved to cry would forget to make a fuss in this romantic atmosphere. They would sit in their parents' arms and smile innocently. Mu Yaja's group of brothers also rushed to the venue and started to entertain the guests. Yun Yechen pushed Yun Yeho's wheelchair and sat down under the arrangement. Yun Yeho looked around at the romantic venue and could not help but sigh. This venue seems to have been prepared with great care. Chapter 1785. Surrounded by such a romantic atmosphere, she did not even dare to raise her voice. Yun Yechen nodded with a smile. It's a once-in-a-lifetime engagement, after all. The preparations must be meticulous. This shows that Shishir's fiancé dotes on Shishir a lot. He put in the effort to give her such a romantic wedding. Today is a good day, I'm so excited that I can't sit still. Yun Yechen smiled. You just have to sit still and watch Shishir receive everyone's blessings. Yun Yeho smiled, feeling happy for Yun Shishir from the bottom of his heart. Yun Qingmiao, who was sitting at the side, could not hold back her surging emotions. All her attention was on the romantic setting of the wedding. Yun Qinli, on the other hand, was looking left and right. She could not help feeling disappointed when she did not spot Gu Xingzi's figure. It seemed that Yun Shishir and Gu Xingzi's relationship was not that good, after all. Gu Xingzi did not attend the engagement ceremony, which meant that the two were not on good terms. Xiang Yu, on the other hand, was only focused on observing the guests present. The venue was divided into the groom's and the bride's seats. The bride's seats were filled with Yun Shishir's relatives and friends. Xiang Yu, on the other hand, was sizing up the groom's guests' attire, and identity tokens. She was obviously looking for a match. From time to time, she would tug at Yun Qingmiao's sleeves and whisper to her about which guest was young and handsome, which guest was wearing an expensive watch, and which guest looked rich. Xiao Shui, who was sitting at the side, heard all of this. She frowned in disgust and wanted to flare up on the spot. She did not expect Shishir to have such a top-notch relative. What was this? Today was Shishir's engagement ceremony, yet this top-notch relative was actually looking for a rich and powerful man for her daughter. If not for the special occasion today, she would have lost her temper on the spot. Xiao Shui forced herself to hold it in. She planned to bring it up to Yun Shishir after the banquet. At 11:40, the BMW appeared at the gate of the castle on time. When Yun Shishir appeared at the door in her splendid attire, she saw 2 rows of concierges holding gift books in their hands. Their postures were ramrod straight and their chests puffed out. Standing at the end were 2 rows of flower boys holding fresh and tender white roses in their hands. As for the flower boys, she didn't know where Mu Yaja had hired them from. They had delicate features, blonde hair, and blue eyes. Standing in the middle of the cluster of flowers, they looked holy and beautiful. The words of the white rose symbolized respect and holy love. Only you are compatible. At the same time, it also means that you belong to me. Yun Shishir looked at the beautiful bouquets and smiled. At the entrance of the castle, a red carpet was laid out neatly. At the end of the red carpet was a BMW waiting for her. Mu Yaja stood beside the carriage. When Yun Shishir's gaze fell on him, she couldn't help but be shocked. It was not that she had never seen him in a suit before. In fact, this man had a preference for suits. Perhaps it was because of his status, but he would only take off his suit and change into casual clothes on rare occasions. In the past, he had always worn a well-ironed suit. However, she had never seen a man who could make a suit look so cold, elegant, and noble. Chapter 1786. However, with that handsome face of his, when he appeared in front of her against the light, she was like a young and immature girl. Her heart was stirred and her heart was beating wildly. So handsome. Especially his hairstyle, which had been carefully trimmed. In the past, his fringe naturally covered his handsome eyebrows. It was not messy, but it did not disappoint. Now that he had styled his hair, his handsome face was completely revealed. His deep and mesmerizing eyes were even more captivating, making it impossible for anyone to avoid them. His gaze seemed to have a magical power. When it landed on her body, it made her heart beat like thunder. She was so nervous that she even forgot how to calm her breathing. Mu Yaja also looked at her with a gentle smile on his lips. It seemed that only because it was her, when he smiled, that gentleness could reach the bottom of his eyes. Suddenly, music started playing. Amidst the sacred music, the flower children held bouquets and sang a sacred and romantic poem in unison. Love is a star shrouded in the morning fog. Without you, heaven also becomes hell. Adorable war horse, subtly trembling, this, shy and gentle embrace, on your beautiful cherry lips, I'm used to using kisses instead of words, my kiss is like a flame from the bottom of my heart. The happiness that kissed me yesterday, has turned into nothingness today, I've obtained sincere love, spending time with you under the parasol tree. A flower child came forward and handed the bouquet of white roses to Mu Yaja. Mu Yaja took the bouquet and slowly walked towards her. With every step he took, her heartbeat actually sped up. The person in front of him was standing there, waiting for him to welcome her and hold her hand. Mu Yaja looked at her. Against the light, his gaze was like a torch, unwavering. Yun Shishir's hands were crossed in front of her as she nervously watched him approach. Her skirt reached the ground, holy and dignified. Even if the wind slightly ruffled her hair, it did not diminish her beauty at all. Speaking of which, temperament was a very strange thing. Some people were born noble, but they didn't have an elegant temperament. As for her, although she wasn't born into a noble family and wasn't born into a rich family, when she appeared at the entrance of the castle, wearing a luxurious dress, her elegant and noble temperament couldn't be concealed and was on the verge of bursting out. Mu Yaja walked in front of her with his right hand behind his back and his left hand holding a bouquet of flowers. He only stopped when he was right in front of her and nodded to look at her. The melodious music of the ceremony sounded. Everyone on the scene held their breaths, either in amazement or anticipation as they stared at this moment. His lowered gaze made her even more nervous. For a moment, her mind was blank and she was at a loss of what to do. She didn't even know where to place it properly. The first time in her life, which she had fantasized about countless times, was displayed so realistically and dreamily in front of her. When the man in her heart stood in front of her with a rose in his hand, she suddenly realized that the wedding in her fantasy was not a dream. Yun Shishir looked at him with a blushing face and a hint of shyness. It was as if her face was dyed with peach blossoms. Even the best quality rouge couldn't compare to her at this moment. She pursed her lips and took the white roses from his hand. Around them, there was a round of applause. Chapter 1787. Yun Shishir nodded and replied in a voice as soft as a mosquito. In the next second, under everyone's stunned gazes, the man carried her in a princess carry. Hugging her waist, he easily supported all of her weight. Mu Yaja gently lowered his head and gracefully kissed her lips, pressing them tightly against her red lips. At this moment, his low and hoarse voice undoubtedly revealed that he was equally happy. You're so beautiful today. Hearing this, Yun Shusher's heart was filled with sweetness and shyness at the same time. Her face became even hotter. No matter how many praises she received, it would not be able to compare to this sentence from him. The highest praise and love was probably this sentence of love from him at this moment. He rarely said such words of love. This man had always been reserved and deep, but when he said it, it made her heart beat faster. Yun Shusher held the fresh flowers tightly and looked up, only to meet his deep eyes. There was a slight burning heat in them, and he did not hide his deep love for her, who was beautiful today. Mu Yaja gently carried her and walked towards the carriage. Even though he was carrying her, his body was as light as a swallow and his steps were light. After getting into the carriage, the concierge walked over and closed the door. The attendant then drove the carriage to the venue of the engagement banquet. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen watched the carriage leave. They looked at each other and smiled, then got into the same carriage and immediately caught up. Sitting in the carriage, Yun Shusher was surprised to find that along the way, both sides of the road were covered with roses. As the carriage moved, the petals scattered on the ground. When the wind blew, the petals flew and danced in the air. It was as if they were in a fairy tale. It's so beautiful. Yun Shusher was so touched that she couldn't help but mumble. Today, he really gave her a big surprise and touched her. She never thought that this man, who was used to being cold and arrogant, would spend so much effort on the engagement banquet. Even the smallest details were not overlooked. Putting aside the huge amount of money he had spent, just the fact that he was able to bring out all the romantic scenes that she had imagined in front of her was enough to make her feel that it was extremely valuable. She was a person who was easily satisfied. She believed that weddings generally went according to the procedure. The most important thing was to be with the person she loved. Nothing else mattered. But he used his actions to tell her that if he loved her, he would spare no effort to fulfill all her dreams. At the same time, he was grateful for his luck. Being able to meet him and stay together with him had truly exhausted all of her luck. The smile on her face fell into his eyes, and he quickly smiled as well. Laughter was contagious between people who were close to each other. She suddenly looked up and said, Mu Yaja, am I dreaming? Why do you say that? Because, it's hard to believe, that you've done so much for me. I didn't dare to think that my engagement party would be so romantic, so I was afraid that this was a dream. When I woke up, it would be over and there would be nothing left. Everything that entered his eyes was something that he had only seen in his dreams. Yun Shusher's worry made him even more amused. He reached out and brushed away the petals that had fallen on her head. He then gently scratched the bridge of her nose. This action seemed to be something that he often did to her. It became the most intimate action between the two of them. He whispered in her ear, "Little fool, this isn't a dream. Everything is real, including me." Chapter 1788. But really, she was really nervous about what she had just seen and what he had just said. Apart from being nervous, she was also looking forward to the upcoming engagement banquet. He looked at her and saw her exposed neck and shoulders. They were fair and delicate, like the graceful curve of a swan. Following the curve, he could see her beautiful fullness. Sexy and charming. Seducing his gaze, he became more and more eager to explore. However, he restrained himself and warned himself that now was not the time to do whatever he wanted. Usually at this time, his ambition would be revealed. He desperately hoped that after the engagement banquet, their wedding would proceed as soon as possible. He was already anxious to keep her as his own. How could he let others think about and covet her when she was so beautiful? What's the venue like? I'm really curious about how you decorated it. She asked with some anticipation, but he still pretended to be mysterious and blinked his eyes. You'll know when we reach the venue. You just have to wait quietly for the engagement banquet that I've prepared for you. Yun Shusher's lips suddenly curved slightly. His answer made her look forward to it even more and her heart felt even sweeter. The carriages moved forward and soon arrived at the venue. However, just as she was about to get off the carriage, as if he could not bear for her toes to touch the ground, he carried her out of the carriage again in front of everyone's eyes. Yun Shusher hit his shoulder lightly but not hard. In her eyes, there was a hint of shyness. Put me down. You're making a joke out of yourself. Who dares to laugh at you? Mu Yaja asked her back. This made her even more embarrassed. However, as he said this, he still put her down. However, just as she steadied herself, the man's strong and warm hand held her hand without hesitation. Yun Shusher laughed in her heart. Was this man afraid that she would run away? But as she thought of this, her heart was still happy. At least, it meant that he cherished her, didn't it? From the man's details, she could see how important she was in his heart. When they arrived at the entrance of the venue and stepped on the red carpet, fireworks bloomed and fell on them. The innocent and romantic laughter of the flower girls standing on both sides of the red carpet quickly stirred up the atmosphere of the entire venue. Yun Shusher had a panoramic view of the entire venue. I like it so much. Especially that arch decorated with flowers, it was simply too romantic. In the past, when she watched movies, she was especially envious of couples standing under this romantic arch and receiving blessings. Yun Shusher secretly sighed in her heart. She let him hold her hand and walked towards the venue. Mu Yaja suddenly caught sight of Lu Jinyu, who was walking out of the venue. Lu Jinyu looked inexplicably nervous, as if he had something important to tell him. Mu Yaja couldn't help but stop and raise his eyebrows in confusion. Seeing that he had stopped walking, Yun Shusher also looked at him curiously. However, when she saw that he was looking into the distance, she followed his line of sight and looked at Lu Jinyu. Lu Jinyu walked over and said in a low voice, "Chief, there was news just now that an unidentified armed cargo ship forced its way to the port of the island. A few unidentified foreign men came down from the ship. I don't know what's going on at the moment, but I'm planning to go over and take a look." Chapter 1789. Mu Yaja's eyes were filled with suspicion, and his tone was filled with displeasure. "Didn't you order people to seal off this place? Why are there still people barging in? It's my fault. But I've already sent people to guard this place, and the sea route is tightly sealed. I don't know the origin of this cargo ship. I've already sent people to stop them, but because those people are carrying weapons of mass destruction, there's been some conflict at the scene. I'm about to rush over to take a look at the situation." Mu Yaja's eyes darkened, and a gloomy expression appeared on his face. "You're saying that it's an armed cargo ship that forcefully docked at the port?" "Yes. What other suspicious information do you have?" Lu Jinyu pondered for a moment and then replied, "Based on the information we have, it should be a cargo ship full of military munitions. As far as I know, such cargo ships are usually used by arms dealers to transport military munitions, and they are equipped with a large number of military munitions. These people are very aggressive, and it seems like they want to barge into the venue. However, I also suspect that they might be pirates who hijacked the cargo ship. But it's just a suspicion, and it hasn't been confirmed yet." Mu Yaja's heart skipped a beat. Arms dealers were businessmen or organizations that engaged in the trade of military munitions. Generally speaking, these business groups would use shipping to transport goods from the factory to the front line of the battlefield in order to fool others. Generally speaking, shipping was a more common method of transport. It was safe and carried large quantities. Generally speaking, cargo ships would be equipped with a large number of well-trained mercenaries. This was a private island. Although it was equipped with a relatively high level of security, it would definitely not be able to gain the upper hand if they were to deal with these people. Arms dealers, that was an organization that played with the flames of war. What could be more lethal than this? But why would an armed cargo ship barge in? The abilities of these people who came were really not small. Immediately, he ordered, "Go over and take a look. If there's anything, report to me immediately." "Yes. I'll rush over to take a look now." Lu Jinyu rushed over as soon as he finished speaking. Yun Shusher saw that the two of them were nervous and alert as they talked, so she couldn't help but feel worried. "What's wrong?" Nothing. Don't worry. However, just as he finished speaking, the rumbling sound of an armed helicopter could be heard from afar. Muyaja raised his head abruptly and saw a helicopter approaching the venue from the direction of the port. All the guests couldn't help but panic. Looking at the helicopter of unknown origin that suddenly appeared in the sky above their heads, no one knew what was going on, and they were faintly panicking. The strong wind created by the propeller was like a tsunami, sweeping away the flowers and trees. Yun Shusher's skirt was also blown up by the strong wind. Muyaja immediately protected her behind him, handsome eyes cold, eyes vigilantly looking at the approaching plane. The helicopter slowly landed, and the cabin door was suddenly pushed open. At the cabin door, a tall and straight figure suddenly leaned out. His military windbreaker was fluttering in the wind, and his sleeves were fluttering. The man had one hand on the cabin door and the other on his hat. His casual posture could not hide his noble and arrogant demeanor. He raised his head slightly, revealing his incomparably handsome face to everyone's eyes. Chapter 1790. Muyaja's gaze turned cold. He was even more wary of this man's aggressiveness. Alas, when she caught sight of the man's handsome face, her breath caught in her throat and she could not make a sound for a moment. At the entrance of the helicopter, Gong Jia was dressed in a military trench coat. The sleeves of his coat fluttered in the wind, and a pair of snow-white military boots made him look even more handsome. His silver-white hair fluttered in the strong wind, constantly invading his arrogant and handsome face. The helicopter slowly made a forced landing. The wind and waves swept up sand and sand. The surrounding guests were either shocked or surprised as they gathered together and looked up at the godlike figure who seemed to have descended from the sky. Who is that? Gosh, isn't that a military helicopter? Who is that? Who is that man? He's so handsome. What a beautiful man. Look at his eyes. They're so mesmerizing. Yun Shusher watched the helicopter descend lower and lower. She widened her eyes in disbelief until she saw that familiar and devilish face. For a moment, an inexplicable bitterness and emotion welled up in her heart. Then, she covered her mouth with her trembling hands and cried tears of joy. Shao Jia, he's here. She thought that he wouldn't show up at her engagement party. Shao Jia had said that the hatred of the Mu family's matricide had seeped into their bones and blood. It was impossible to get rid of it. The Gong and Mu families were irreconcilable. He would not object, but he would not attend her engagement party with the intention of giving her his blessings. Although he did not say it explicitly, she understood the meaning behind his words. Therefore, she had already mentally prepared herself to not have him at such an important moment in her life. She did not expect that he would appear. Like a god, he descended from the sky and appeared in front of her. Rumble, the helicopter's propellers whirred at high speed. A suspension ladder was suddenly lowered from the cabin's entrance. Gong Jia gracefully and nimbly descended the ladder. When he was 3 meters away from the ground, he abruptly let go of the handrail and landed suavely. With a leap, he landed steadily on the ground. Ah, that was so dangerous. Jumping down from such a high place is too scary. Everyone cried out in surprise. However, when he stood up straight, he took off the white military cap on his head and raised his head. His lips curled into an arrogant and enchanting arc. The aura that accompanied him seemed to be natural and noble. It was dangerous and domineering to the point of being unreasonable. The powerful aura instantly spread toward the crowd. It was impossible to resist it, stunning everyone at the scene. It was as if he was an innate king, causing others to involuntarily submit to him. Gong Jia quietly stood where he was. His eyes fell on Yun Shusher and he was suddenly shocked. However, there was a flash of emotion on his face and a gentle smile appeared on his face. Thank goodness. He wasn't too late. This time, he went to sign a bill and hurriedly loaded the goods. He didn't even have the time to send the batch of munitions to the battlefield, so he hurriedly changed his route and rushed here. She wanted to arrive at the venue on the day of the engagement banquet. Along the way, the cargo ship was unlucky. It suddenly encountered a thunderstorm and had to temporarily anchor at the port for a period of time to avoid the wind and rain. However, when he looked at the time, he was afraid that he would not be able to make it. Therefore, he did not wait for the thunderstorm to pass and hurriedly set sail again. Chapter 1791. The sea route on the island was completely sealed off. He had paid a huge price to break through the blockade and finally reached the port. When he reached the port, he tried to force his way to the shore but was stopped by the island's security personnel. When Gong Jie got off the cargo ship, he was immediately stopped. Even though he didn't care about the island's security arrangements at all. He had a group of powerful mercenaries with him. It would only take him a few minutes to break through the defenses and clear a path. However, today was his sister's happiest day. He didn't want to cause too much of a commotion and didn't want to be stained with blood on such a good day. Hence, he used the cargo ship's helicopter to rush all the way to the banquet venue. Fortunately, he wasn't late. At the most important moment, he arrived just in time. At first, he had a long internal struggle about whether or not to attend this engagement banquet. However, he couldn't let go of this feud that had seeped into his blood and bones. Not coming. However, he couldn't miss such an important day for his sister. He had already missed 15 years with her. How many more 15 years could he miss? If he didn't come, his sister would definitely be sad and upset, right? Ever since he could remember, Gong Jie could be said to be fearless. Even if he respected his father from the bottom of his heart, he was never afraid of him. However, the only thing he was afraid of was her tears. He couldn't stand by and watch her be disappointed and upset. Hence, he came. He put down all his grudges and hatred and appeared here to give his sister his blessings at the most important moment. Gong Jie stood upright with one hand in his trouser pocket. The windbreaker on his shoulders fluttered in the wind, elongating his shadow. Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes and was a little suspicious of his identity. After secretly sizing him up, his gaze suddenly stopped at the armband on his windbreaker. The family seal of the Hurricane Group was engraved on the armband. Although Mu Yaja couldn't recognize who this handsome man in front of him was, he recognized the family seal at a glance. Hurricane Group. After his mind went blank for a few seconds, his gaze suddenly returned to Su Yangyi's face. A strange suspicion instantly floated into his mind. At first, he merely swept a glance at the man's face, but when he came back to his senses and scrutinized the man's face again, he was taken aback all of a sudden. Gong Jie had a particularly beautiful face. It was indeed inappropriate to describe a man as beautiful. However, it was not inappropriate to describe him. Gong Jie's skin was fair, but his eyes were as deep as a demon's. Especially his thick black eyelashes and dark pupils, it made him look even more enchanting. His thin lips were naturally curved in a devilish arc. Even if he wasn't smiling, the curled corners of his lips gave off a devilish and unruly impression. He was dressed in a long robe, and his face was devilishly charming. His short hair was as white as snow, and his sharp eyebrows made him look even more imposing. However, whether it was the charm or the outline of his facial features, they were extremely similar to Yun Shusher's imagination. If it wasn't for the aura, if the two of them stood together and changed into the same attire, it would be impossible to tell who was who. They were too alike. Hence, Mu Yaja couldn't help but suspect the identity of the man in front of him. Chapter 1792. However, Gong Jie didn't seem to notice Mu Yaja's silent scrutiny. Instead, he walked over to Yun Shusher. After he landed on the ground, the helicopter slowly rose into the air. However, it wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, it hovered about 30 meters above the ground. From the helicopter, it looked like it was raining. Countless flower petals fluttered down. So many rose petals. Ah! God, it's so beautiful. This feeling is as beautiful as a shower of petals. The sudden romance and surprise surprised everyone. Accompanied by the continuous exclamations, Gong Jie smiled as he slowly walked over to Yun Shusher amidst the shower of petals. Yun Shusher's heartbeat started to beat violently once again. In an instant, the rhythm of her heart was messed up. It wasn't until he was right in front of her that she came back to her senses. She blinked her eyes and a line of tears fell from her eyes. When Muyaja saw this scene, he furrowed his brows. The guess in his heart kept jumping. Hence, when Yun Shusher walked out from behind him and walked towards Gong Jia, he actually didn't stop her. Gong Jia looked at her. It was as if in this vast world, everything in the world was overshadowed. Only she was filled with vibrant colors. Other than her, no one else could enter his eyes. He stood still in front of her. Following which, he gently reached out his hand and tucked a strand of hair that had been messed up by the north wind behind her ear. "Sister. I'm late," Gong Jia said apologetically. His eyes curved as if he was smiling innocently, yet it also seemed like he was acting coquettishly towards her. However, when he saw the tears seeping out from the corners of her eyes, his heart ached as he knitted his brows. He said helplessly, "Sister. What's wrong with you?" She was actually crying. Yun Shusher pursed her lips and choked out in grievance, "I thought today I wouldn't see you. I thought you wouldn't be willing to come, little fool. How could I not come to your engagement ceremony? But you didn't pick up my calls. I called you, but I was told that you weren't in the service area. I thought you were deliberately avoiding me." The more Yun Shusher spoke, the more aggrieved she felt. Tears welled up in her eyes. Seeing this, Gong Jia was even more at a loss. He hurriedly tried to stop her tears. His sister had loved to cry since she was young. In front of outsiders, she always liked to play the hero. Although she looked strong, her heart was extremely weak. When he heard that she had called him and he was not in the service area, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Sis, if you call my number, it will automatically cut off the signal after I leave the country. When I'm on business trips, I always use a satellite phone." "So?" Gong Jia smiled helplessly, his handsome eyebrows frowning weakly, but his eyes revealed indulgence and doting. "But look, who is the person standing in front of you now?" "Little Jia, so, here I am. Although I'm a little late, I'm not too late. I didn't miss your most important moment." As Gong Jia spoke, he cupped her face gently and comforted her softly, "So, don't cry, okay? My dear sister, you're the most beautiful when you smile. Today is such an important day. It's not good to cry in front of so many people." Chapter 1793. As Gong Jia spoke, he gently cupped her face and softly coaxed her, "So, don't cry, okay? My dear sister, you're the most beautiful when you smile. Today is such an important day, it's not good to cry in front of so many people." A 24-year-old handsome man was actually trying his best to act cute in front of her, trying his best to make her laugh. Yun Shusher instantly broke into laughter and gently wiped away the moisture at the corner of her eyes. Seeing this, Gong Jia's gaze softened. "That's a good girl. Sister is the most beautiful when she smiles. I love the way you smile the most." Yun Shusher helplessly said, "Shao Jia, stop fooling around. Why do I feel like you're coaxing a child?" "What do you mean coaxing a child?" Gong Jia innocently pursed his lips and then curled his lips, "I'm coaxing my little princess." Then, he suddenly gently lifted her hand, raised it, nodded, and planted a kiss on the back of her hand. He gave her a mysterious wink and coaxed her, "Sister, I'll cast a spell for you, do you want to see it?" Yun Shusher turned around to look at Muyaja, only to see him standing there expressionlessly. However, there wasn't much enmity in his eyes towards Gong Jia. She calmed down and when she looked back, she curiously widened her eyes. "What spell?" "Close your eyes," Gong Jia immediately requested childishly. Yun Shusher was puzzled. "Close my eyes? What are you trying to do?" "Close, close, close. If you don't close your eyes, how can I cast a spell?" Gong Jia acted like a child and said coquettishly. Yun Shishir couldn't argue with him and agreed a few times before obediently closing her eyes. She really closed her eyes tightly, so she couldn't see anything. However, after a while, she inexplicably felt a weight on her wrist, as if there was a touch of coldness on her skin. She was a little surprised and her eyelids moved. Gong Jia immediately said, "No peeking." Yun Shishir obediently closed her eyes again. He didn't even dare to open his eyes secretly. After a long time, Gong Jia said gently, "All right, open your eyes." Yun Shishir slowly opened her eyes. However, the moment she opened her eyes, a dazzling light leaped into her eyes. She was immediately attracted by this dazzling light. When she opened her eyes, she saw that a flower had been placed on her wrist. However, this flower was different from the others. Under the 3 blood-colored roses, there was a dazzling diamond. She didn't notice it at first glance because this diamond was embedded in the petals. Moreover, like a rose, its entire body was shining with a deep red. The blood-red resplendent diamond and the rose petals complemented each other. When she closed her eyes earlier, she suddenly felt her hands sink. It was because the resplendent diamond weighed at least 3 carats. Blood diamond. That was extremely rare and precious. A 1-carat blood diamond was already extremely precious. A 3-carat blood diamond could be described as priceless. Don't look down on this 3-carat diamond. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was a priceless treasure. In a London auction, a 0.9-carat blood diamond was auctioned for a sky-high price of 500 million. Chapter 1794. Yun Shishir's eyes widened in shock. She was so stunned that she could not speak. She reached out and gently stroked the diamond's surface. She could tell that the diamond had just been processed. The cut surface was a little blunt, so it was obvious that it had just been cut. Yun Shishir was so touched that she couldn't speak. She didn't know where the diamond came from. "Do you like it?" Gong Jia looked at her nervously, afraid that she would say, "Don't like it," and he wouldn't know what to do. This gift was part of the Gong family's collection. Back then, when his father was selling arms in the Middle East, he sold a batch of weapons to a local terrorist organization. The terrorist organization couldn't come up with enough US dollars, so they gave him a blood diamond as a reward. The terrorist leader didn't recognize the treasure, but that didn't mean that Gong Xiaoying didn't recognize it. This blood diamond couldn't be compared to a normal diamond. After he brought it back, he kept it as a treasure. This blood diamond was rare and precious. In fact, this blood diamond was 4 carats. After carving it, it was reduced to 3 carats. There was no other 4-carat blood diamond in the world. Even if there was one, it hadn't appeared yet. Before the second one appeared, the blood diamond in Yun Shishir's hand was the real king of diamonds. Gong Jia took the blood diamond that his father had carefully collected from Zhenbao Pavilion and ordered the designer to design and carve it overnight. Finally, on the way here, he used fresh rose petals to decorate the blood diamond into a bracelet so that he could personally wear the bracelet on her wrist. Yun Shishir was so touched that she couldn't speak. Just by looking at the design of the blood diamond, she knew that this guy had spent a lot of effort on it. "I like it a lot." Yun Shishir nodded. The satisfaction on her face wasn't fake at all. She sincerely expressed her love for it. She raised her head and said with a smile, "Actually, the fact that you're here is the best gift you can give me. Nothing else is as important as you coming. I definitely won't miss sister's engagement. Not only that, I won't miss any important occasions in the future." He spoke seriously and there was no trace of a joke on his face. Instead, it was extremely sincere. "However, I have another reason for coming here." As Gong Jia spoke, he suddenly raised his cold gaze and looked at the man behind Yun Shishir. He looked at Mu Yaja, but his gaze was no longer as gentle and docile as it was when he faced Yun Shishir. Instead, it was piercingly cold and sharp. It was cold, scrutinizing, and directly pressuring. Mu Yaja also looked at him without any intention of backing down. 2 pairs of eyes met in midair. Invisible sparks flew from the collision, like a smokeless war. At that time, the two men looked at each other, but it was more like a battle between kings. Their eyes met, but it was more like a confrontation. The collision of the two men's auras created a strong magnetic field that almost shook the earth. In the end, Gong Jia was the first to break the strange silence with a smile. Mu Yaja. Do you know who I am? If I'm not wrong, Mu Yaja's voice paused slightly, but his eyes were still cold. Hurricane Group. Chapter 1795. Oh, I'm sorry, but you guessed wrong. Gong Jia, on the other hand, had a look of pity on his face as he shook his finger. While Mu Yaja was puzzled, Gong Jia suddenly reached out and hugged Yunshishir's shoulder. He said to him mischievously, I'm not here today as a member of Hurricane Group. Instead, I'm here as my sister's younger brother to attend this engagement ceremony. The corner of Mu Yaja's eyes twitched fiercely. However, he heard Gong Jia say in a lazy tone, Ayaya, let me think. Actually, you should call me brother-in-law, right? Yunshishir was instantly amused by his mischievous tone. Mu Yaja's expression became even more strange. Could he imagine an enemy who had always been on the opposite side smiling and asking him to call him brother-in-law? Even though he was mentally prepared for Gong Jia to be Yunshishir's younger brother, he was still caught off guard. Although the siblings looked similar, if not for their different attire, height, and dressing, it would be difficult to tell who was who. However, Gong Jia calling him brother-in-law still confused a certain man. Yunshishir said helplessly, Shao Jia, you, sister. I didn't say anything wrong. Gong Jia said coquettishly, I'm your younger brother. Since that's the case, shouldn't he call me brother-in-law? Yunshishir raised both hands and compromised. Okay. Yes, you're right. He should call you brother-in-law. Gong Jia had an I knew it expression. Then, he raised his chin at Mu Yaja in an incomparably calm manner. As if out of some kind of provocation, he grinned and said, since my sister has said so, shouldn't you call me brother-in-law? Sure. Mu Yaja also smiled elegantly. Then, he raised his eyebrows in a somewhat provocative manner and said, but before that, shouldn't you call me brother-in-law? Half a second after he said that, Gong Jia smiled and blurted out, brother-in-law. Mu Yaja, Gong Jia laughed in his heart. It wasn't difficult for him to call him brother-in-law. Since he had come here, he had already prepared himself mentally. Even though he was well aware of the identity of the man in front of him, and that the blood of the person he hated the most flowed in his veins, he was willing to temporarily bury the hatchet for his sister. At least for now, he could let go of all hatred and face it calmly. Mu Yaja gritted his teeth and unwillingly snorted. Brother-in-law. Gong Jia seemed to be deliberately making things difficult for him as he said faintly, brother-in-law, you don't seem to want to acknowledge me as your brother-in-law. Mu Yaja, but it's okay. This isn't the main point of my visit. Gong Jia paused. Suddenly, he let go of Yunshishir's shoulder and strode toward him. He only stopped when he was standing in front of Mu Yaja. The two men faced each other. They had the same height and aura. When they confronted each other, they were evenly matched. Gong Jia looked at Mu Yaja coldly. He narrowed his eyes and his gaze suddenly turned cold. He said in a low voice that Yunshishir couldn't hear clearly, I'm here to warn you. If you dare to bully my sister and let her suffer even the slightest grievance, I'll destroy your Mu group. Chapter 1796. He didn't hear anything else, but the words, flatten the Mu group, were loud and clear, and he heard it clearly. A question popped up in Jiangshan's mind. Who is this guy? What an arrogant tone. Flatten Mu Corporation. What kind of courage does he have to make such a threat in front of boss? Is he here to cause trouble for the engagement ceremony? Jiangshan walked forward with a cold expression, but Mu Yaja raised his hand to stop him. Boss. Jiangshan was puzzled, but he didn't know why Mu Yaja stopped him. Lu Jinyu, who had rushed over, was also shocked to see this scene. He didn't hear what kind of provocation Gong Jia had said, but just by looking at his unfriendly attitude, he could tell that he had come with ill intentions. Mu Yaja's face darkened slightly, but he didn't say a word. Gong Jia stared at him like a tiger watching its prey, like a lion, defending his sister's happiness. Yun Shishir was marrying this man. Sure. He was willing to believe in his sister's judgment and choice. As her younger brother, even if he was worried, he had no right to interfere. However, his sister's happiness was the only bottom line that could not be crossed. His principle was to defend his sister's happiness. Just like how Yu had questioned Mu Yaja back then, what kind of reason did a person rely on to become stronger? His answer was the same as Yu's. That was to protect the person he loved. Yun Shishir was the person he loved the most. In order to protect her happiness, he naturally wouldn't shirk his responsibility. Gong Jia stared at him silently and didn't say a word. He was waiting to see how Mu Yaja would respond. After a long period of dead silence, as if a century had passed, Mu Yaja suddenly smiled and said, "Flatten Mu Corporation?" Gong Jia raised his eyebrows and didn't say anything. However, the emotion in his eyes was a silent warning. Since he could say such words, it meant that he could do what he said. Mu Yaja didn't have much of an expression on his face. He just faintly expressed his regret, "I'm sorry. I don't think you'll have the chance." After he finished speaking, his lips curled into a smile, but he was extremely conceited. Since he had decided to marry her, he would pamper her for the rest of her life. Regardless of birth, old age, sickness or death, regardless of wealth or wealth. Similarly, cherishing this woman was his bottom line as her husband. "I don't need you to remind me of that." When Gong Jia heard this, he smiled and raised his eyebrows. Obviously, he was very satisfied with his response. "That's the best." Yun Shishir looked over curiously. She couldn't understand the invisible confrontation between the two men. Gong Jia turned and looked at her. Then, he smiled and naturally hooked his arm around Mu Yaja's shoulder. "I just had a friendly conversation with my brother-in-law." Mu Yaja was speechless. "Friendly?" He said, "Flatten Mu Corporation," in a friendly manner. The corners of Mu Yaja's eyes twitched. Yun Shishir obviously didn't believe him. She said suspiciously, "But I saw your expression just now. You looked very fierce." Gong Jia said truthfully, "Yes. Just now, I was threatening my dear brother-in-law. If he doesn't treat you well, I'll flatten Mu Corporation." Yun Shishir was stunned for a moment. She thought that he was joking and immediately said, "Shao Jia, stop fooling around." Chapter 1797. Yun Shishir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "With a clown like you backing me up, your brother-in-law definitely won't dare to bully me. But isn't it a little too exaggerated to say that you'll wipe out the Mu group? Although I know you're joking, your brother-in-law might think that you're a terrorist if he doesn't know." The corners of his lips twitched violently as he felt a pang of guilt. His words came true. He really panicked. "My dear sister, how did you know that your brother is a terrorist? Could it be the legendary telepathy?" Gong Jia immediately dispelled his doubts. She must be joking. He hid his identity so well. How could she know that he was a terrorist? But strictly speaking, he wasn't a real terrorist. He was just a little more awesome than terrorists, just a level higher. It could be said that if the Hurricane Group stopped the large-scale weapons shipments to the Middle East, it could be said that more than half of the world's terrorists could close down at home and have nothing to do. As the Hurricane Group that dominated the world's war situation, how could terrorists compete with it? Gong Jia immediately changed the topic coquettishly. "What? Sister, you actually said that your brother is like a terrorist. I'm so sad." Yun Shishir smiled helplessly. "Who asked you to speak like a terrorist?" Gong Jia was speechless. He was used to speaking like this and couldn't change it. But, sister was biased, she was obviously protecting his brother-in-law. He felt so wronged. Gong Jia glared at Mu Yaja angrily. Mu Yaja felt a murderous gaze on him. When he looked back, he met Gong Jie's resentful gaze. The two men's gazes met again in mid-air and there was a burst of electromagnetic sparks. Mu Yaja glanced at Gong Jia and then smiled. He said in a low voice, "Don't worry, I know that my brother-in-law is joking. He said that because he's afraid that you'll be wronged, so I won't take it seriously." Although he said that, a certain man couldn't help but silently criticize in his heart. To be honest, he was actually quite curious. Although the man in front of him was young, his tone was arrogant and he actually dared to threaten him. Actually, he really wanted to see for himself what kind of means and capabilities this man had to be able to flatten the Mu group overnight. He knew this man's identity. He was from the Hurricane Group and had extraordinary capabilities. But the Mu Group couldn't be wiped out by the Hurricane Group overnight. Did he think that the Mu Group was weak? How could they be so weak that they couldn't even withstand a single blow? Jiang Shen and Lu Jinyu were perplexed. They exchanged glances, but neither of them knew what was going on. Brother-in-law. Sister. Brother-in-law. They were totally to be confused. What was going on right now? Up to Gong Jia and Jiang were similar. Jiang to Yun, Gong Jia to Yun to look. Then to Yun's. To Tut. To Jiang, T to look. TTTST biological siblings. Lu Jinyu pointed at Gong Jia in surprise. Could it be that, this man who appeared out of nowhere is sister-in-law's brother? Yun Shishir smiled awkwardly. Yes, he's my brother. What's wrong? We do look alike. Yun Shishir explained, we're twins, so it's normal that we look alike. Chapter 1798. Twins. Then they were siblings. Jiang Shen was confused. He suddenly interrupted, cleared his throat, and pointed at the helicopter hovering in the sky. Moreover, a burly mercenary was standing at the cabin door, scattering flower petals like a celestial maiden. He asked quietly, whose helicopter is this? Gong Jia said calmly, it's mine. Yours? Jiang Shen pondered for a moment. Then, he suddenly thought of something. Then, he asked quietly, in that case, the armed cargo ship that forcefully broke through the blockade and docked at the port is also yours? Yes. It's mine, Gong Jia broke out in cold sweat and felt guilty. Then, he said righteously, but what do you mean by an armed cargo ship? It's obviously an ordinary cruise ship. Don't talk nonsense. An ordinary cruise ship. Jiang Shen narrowed his eyes suspiciously and sized him up. F***CK. Did he really think he was retarded? How could he not tell a cruise ship from a cargo ship? Moreover, who would stuff hundreds of containers full of firearms on a cruise ship? Also, how could an ordinary cruise ship forcefully break through the blockade of the route and dock at the port? Moreover, who had seen a cruise ship equipped with long-range missiles and large-scale cannons? Who had seen it before? Who had seen it before? This guy was lying through his teeth. Jiang Shen said, sister-in-law, your brother can't be, he was probably an arms dealer. Gong Jia snorted coldly. Today is my sister's big day. That's why I came all the way here. Yun Shishir also asked suspiciously, Shao Jia, is this cruise ship yours? Gong Jia was stunned for a moment, then said, it's mine. Yun Shishir asked again, what do you do for a living? I'm a businessman. I have a few private ships to carry goods. Jiang Shen sneered silently in his heart. He was a businessman. There was nothing wrong with that. He was just an unscrupulous businessman. When Yu and Xiao Chen arrived, they saw Gong Jia in a trench coat standing beside Yun Shishir from afar. The corners of their eyes twitched and their hearts skipped a beat. Why did this guy rush over? How did he get here? Suddenly, he realized that he had heard that an armed cargo ship had broken through the blockade and was anchored at the private port of the island. Could it be that this was his doing? Yu rubbed her forehead helplessly. Did this uncle of hers have to be so high profile? Upon hearing the commotion, Yun Yecheng and Yun Yeho walked out as well. According to the procedure, the next step would be for Yun Yecheng to hold her hand and hand it over to Muyaja. For this reason, he deliberately wore a well-ironed suit. Although he was slightly older and had experienced many changes in the past few years, he still deliberately dressed himself up on such a rare occasion. He looked very presentable. However, when he walked out, he saw Yun Shishir standing together with an unfamiliar yet familiar man. He was immediately confused. The reason why he said he was unfamiliar was because he had never seen this man before. He said he was familiar because he looked similar to Yun Shishir, especially that pair of eyes. It was as if they were cast from the same mold. This is Chapter 1799. Gong Jia turned around and saw Yun Yecheng in a suit. Upon hearing Yun Shishir's introduction, he was stunned for a moment and did not react in time. Father. Suddenly, he came back to his senses and understood that this so-called father was probably referring to her adoptive father. Yun Shishir continued, when I was 9 years old, he was the one who brought me back to the Yun family and adopted me at the welfare center. Although he's my adoptive father, he's always treated me like his own. Even though I'm not his biological father, he's never mistreated me in any way. In my heart, he's my father. Shao Jia, you should call him uncle. Gong Jia nodded obediently at his mother's words. Following her wishes, he greeted the man meekly, "Hello, uncle." He was used to being high and mighty. Unless it was in front of his father, he would never bow his head to anyone. However, this ordinary man in front of him was different. He was his sister's adoptive father. Since she said that he had always treated her like his own all these years, then he would be grateful to anyone who treated his sister well. After all, this man had taken over the role of a father to take care of his sister all these years. At least, he had saved her from being homeless. Just based on this point alone, he acknowledged it. Thus, this uncle was a sincere greeting from the bottom of his heart. Muyaja, who was standing at the side, was silent. This Gong Jia might seem arrogant and unruly on the surface, like a young and aggressive leopard, but in front of Yun Shishir, he was as docile and adorable as a little lamb. This contrast, it was simply too much. Yu Yu's lips twitched as well. This uncle of his was a classic sister Khan. He would do whatever his mommy said and would never refute her. He was extremely docile. He was a little uncomfortable. Recalling Gong Jia's domineering and unruly style on a daily basis, and then looking at this man who was like a little lamb right now, the little lad could not help feeling flustered. Xiao Yichen, who was standing at the side, commented quietly, "This man looks so much like mommy." Yu Yu said, "You should call this man uncle." Uncle? Xiao Yichen was puzzled. Why? Idiot. Because he's mommy's younger brother. Mommy has a younger brother. And they're twins. Twins? Isn't that the same as us? Xiao Yichen then said, "This man is quite handsome." Humph. Good genes, nothing can be done about it. Yun Yecheng looked at the Gong Jia and smiled courteously. He then rubbed his hands nervously and looked at Yun Shishir inquiringly. "Shishir, Dad, this is my little brother. When I was 9 years old, I was separated from him because of a car accident. I haven't heard from you for 15 years, but the heavens are kind enough to let us meet again." Yun Shishir replied, but her face was filled with joy. She did not have the chance to introduce her father to Shao Jia because she was worried that he would not approve of him. Alas, it turned out that her worries were unnecessary. Yun Yecheng chuckled when he heard that. "Sure. Great. This means that we're destined to be siblings. Still, the car accident you're talking about." Yun Shishir said helplessly, "I'll go back and explain it to you later. It's complicated." Chapter 1800. However, this man's identity was worth investigating. Lu Jinyu took another look at Gong Jia and was stunned for a few seconds when he caught sight of the epaulets on the latter's windbreaker. The symbol of this epaulet was very familiar. Hurricane Group. Lu Jinyu's face turned pale when he realized what was going on. Hurricane Group, wasn't that the #1 military group that caused the entire world to tremble in fear? It was said that they were so powerful that they could make the world tremble with a stomp of their feet. Their influence was terrifying. The Mu Group's power was obvious to all in the world. If one had to describe it, the world's financial system would fall into a state of depression with just a few sneezes from the Mu Group. However, the Hurricane Group was different. The Hurricane Group was a powerful family that controlled the world's war. It could be said that 70% of the world's weapons came from the Hurricane Group's military factories. The Gong family's every move was directly related to the direction of the war. All the wars in the world ended because of them, and they also started because of them. The world's financial system was in crisis, but the war never stopped. It could be said that the Hurricane Group was growing stronger and stronger, and it was a family that was feared by many. Lu Jinyu couldn't help but feel confused. What? Sister-in-law's younger brother was actually from the Hurricane Group. Who exactly was he? Judging from his momentum, he seemed to be of an extraordinary status. Could he be a core member of the Gong family? Jiang Shen whispered, Jinyu, could this be someone from the Hurricane Group? Lu Jinyu said gloomily, judging from his stance, it can't be wrong. It seems like he's from the Gong family. In that case, sister-in-law's maternal family is also very powerful. But sister-in-law doesn't seem to know her younger brother's identity. It's a little strange. Boss is in trouble. He thought that he had married a little white rabbit, but it turns out that this little white rabbit has a group of lions behind her. Lu Jinyu suddenly mourned for Mu Yaja for a few seconds and then said, if sister-in-law is from the Gong family, then her maternal family is indeed difficult to deal with. Jiang Shen's heart also ached for Mu Yaja as he observed a few seconds of silence. His heart ached for his boss for a second. Mu Yaja looked at them coldly, but he didn't know what these two fellows were silently criticizing him about. He glared at Zhang Xian as a warning. Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shen cleared their throats in unison, feeling a little awkward. He told Yun Shishir, it's getting late. Since everyone is here, it's time to start the ceremony. Then, he walked over and wanted to hold Yun Shishir's hand. Gong Jie said politely, hello, uncle. I have something to discuss with you. Yun Yecheng was slightly unaccustomed to his gentleness, so he asked politely, what's the matter? Gong Jie lowered his head and glanced at Yun Shishir beside him. Then, he smiled gently and asked, can I take my sister's place at the engagement ceremony today? This, Gong Jie clasped his hands together like a child. Please, please. This is a wish that I've been wanting to fulfill for the past 15 years. I hope that you can fulfill it for me. The reason why he had risked his life to rush all the way here at all costs was so that he could hold Yun Shishir's hand and walk through the ceremony with her. This was also his wish. Chapter 1801. Gong Jie then sought his sister's opinion. Sis, can I? I want to hold your arm as we enter the venue. Of course. Yun Yecheng agreed. Great. Great. Since you're her brother, it's Shishir's wish for you to hold Shishir's arm as she enters the venue on such a special day. Of course, I'm happy for you. Thank you, uncle. Gong Jie smiled as happily as a child. He suddenly thought of something and took out his walkie-talkie to give an order. Withdraw the helicopter and don't disturb the order of the venue. Everyone, stay on the ship and listen to my orders. Don't move without my permission. Roger, sir. Gong Jie put away the walkie-talkie and gently held Yun Shishir's soft hand. He smiled at her. Sis. Let's go. Okay. Gong Jie then led her slowly down the red carpet. Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shen then hurriedly immersed themselves in the ceremony. When Gong Jie and Yun Shishir appeared at the end of the red carpet, the sacred music played again. All the guests in their seats stood up in unison and looked in their direction. They were either looking at the bride-to-be with anticipation or blessing. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen followed behind obediently. The two little guys walked up to Yun Shishir and silently lifted the hem of her gown that was spread out on the floor. A group of cute little flower girls standing in 2 rows walked up with flower baskets in their hands. The flower baskets were filled with fresh and tender rose petals. They wore pink gauze dresses and had small and cute angel wings on their backs. They were as cute as angels, just like the incarnation of Cupid, the god of love. The flower girls walked on both sides. Before the engagement ceremony, these cute little Lolas had undergone some training. Hence, when Yun Shishir and Gong Jia appeared on the red carpet, they grabbed the petals in their baskets and sprinkled them over Yun Shishir's head. Some of the flower girls were especially pretty and adorable. They had blonde hair, blue eyes, deep-set brows, and exquisite European features. Some of the flower girls were the guests' children. They had black hair and amber eyes, but after dressing up, they were extremely beautiful. However, gradually, these flower girls saw Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen behind Yun Shishir. They curiously surrounded them and asked in their childish voices, "What's your name?" Yu Yu pouted and ignored them. She proudly turned her face to the side. Those little flower girls, however, persevered and went to the other side. While scattering petals, they smiled and said, "Can we be friends?" Yu Yu proudly ignored them. Xiao Yichen, however, liked to play with girls. Hence, he said, "His name is Yu Yu." Yu Yu glared at him. "Why did you betray me? Idiot Yu Yu, how can you bear to reject such a cute girl?" Xiao Yichen lectured in all seriousness. "Mommy said that you have to be gentle with girls." Yu Yu was speechless. When the guests saw these adorable children interacting so innocently and heard Xiao Yichen sternly say, "You have to be gentle with girls," they were amused. These little guys are so adorable. That's right. These two children are so handsome. Look at them. They're wearing suits and look as elegant as gentlemen. Chapter 1802. When Yun Shishir appeared in front of all the guests in her splendid attire, they were deeply impressed by her beauty. Gosh! She's too beautiful. Many of the guests had many hazy fantasies about the bride on their way here. Now that they saw it with their own eyes, they were deeply moved. Perhaps, strictly speaking, Yun Shishir was not the most beautiful bride they had ever seen, but she was the most elegant woman. Some people were beautiful, but this beauty was empty and soulless, like a porcelain doll that had a surface but no soul. Yun Shishir's beauty, however, was not limited to the surface. It was a beauty that bloomed from the inside out. Her luxurious gown was like a blooming rose. The ingenious design, not to mention the priceless jewelry on her body, accentuated her otherworldly beauty. Because of her presence, the entire venue became dreamy and illusory, like a fairyland. Her beauty made everyone gasp in admiration. Someone noticed the bouquet on Yun Shishir's hand. Even from afar, one could see the dazzling blood diamond. Do you see the diamond on the bride-to-be's hand? It's so beautiful. It's as red as blood. It's so mesmerizing. That's a blood diamond. It's very rare. Even a carat of it is very expensive. It's basically something that can only be found by chance. This small one is priceless. Blood diamonds are the noblest among diamonds. Also, this diamond doesn't look small. It's about 3 carats. The craftsmanship of the carving is uncanny. It looks like the raw stone should be even bigger. What extravagance! Someone with sharp eyes was able to estimate the weight of the diamond at a glance. Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli were also stunned by Yun Shishir's expensive outfit. At first, they snorted disdainfully when they saw Yun Shishir's gown. They thought to themselves, marrying into a rich family is indeed different. Not to mention his outfit, just the accessories on his body alone would be enough to blind them. His heart was filled with envy and jealousy. However, it was out of his reach. However, when they noticed the bouquet on Yun Shishir's wrist, their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. They did not know how precious a blood diamond was. In comparison, this dazzling diamond was dazzling and mesmerizing. Which girl did not like diamonds? There was no way they could resist diamonds. Who could be as lucky as Yun Shishir to be doted on by everyone? Therefore, most people could only look at her in envy. When Yun Qingmiao saw the man holding Yun Shishir's arm, her eyes widened in shock and amazement. "Qinli, look at the man beside Shishir, he's so handsome. He's better looking than many celebrities on TV." "I don't think so. I think brother-in-law is more handsome than him." Although Yun Qinli said this, she still looked at him with admiration. "But brother Mu is already taken. You'd better stop thinking about it. This man looks quite similar to Shishir," Xiang Yu suddenly said from the side. Yun Qingmiao was surprised. She did a close comparison and found that the man looked very similar to Yun Shishir. She had never heard of such a person before, though. Chapter 1803. Yun Qingmiao chimed in. Judging from his attire, he should be a wealthy and respectable figure. Perhaps, he's also a big shot with a powerful background. Yun Qinli was a little jealous, so much so that the way she looked at Yun Shishir changed. Indeed, one could not compare with another. She envied Yun Shishir's good fortune. Initially, she was jealous that she had the opportunity to go to university, had a high academic qualification, and was born in the city. She was like a rich young lady who lived a life of luxury and did not have to worry about food and clothing. Later, when she met Yun Shishir's fiancé, she muttered to herself how she had met such a good man. He had an extraordinary background, a respectable family background, and a handsome face. She could not figure it out. How could she have met so many lucky people? In Yun Qinli's heart, Yun Shishir was like a princess who had been spoiled by the heavens. With so much love on her, she did not have to worry about living an ignoble life. Now, however, it was only at the engagement ceremony that she was truly defeated. Yun Qinli could no longer suppress the sense of defeat in her heart. Feeling unbalanced, she bit her lip and kept looking at the backs of Yun Shishir and Gong Jie. Under everyone's gaze, Gong Jie held Yun Shishir's arm as they walked to the flower arch. Then, they stopped in their tracks and stood there with a smile. Lu Jinyu walked over in a formal suit. He was in charge of this engagement banquet. As the MC of Mu Yaja's engagement banquet, he naturally felt honored. Therefore, he had gone through the script several times until Mu Yaja was satisfied with it. In many weddings, the opening speech was very emotional, but if it was too emotional, it would inevitably appear a little pretentious. With the microphone in hand, Lu Jinyu's concise and humorous opening speech pushed the atmosphere in the venue to a climax, driving the guests' emotions to a high. As a key figure in Xinyu Financial Corporation's board meetings, Lu Jinyu naturally did not have stage fright or shyness, but he could not help but feel a little nervous before going on stage. After all, it was different from the past. Today, he was going to make an opening speech. It was Big Boss's engagement party. He would be lying if he said that he wasn't nervous. If he messed up, his boss would definitely not let him off. Not only would his bonus be deducted, but he would also have to pay for his marriage. Therefore, he attached great importance to it. But when he went up on stage, he quickly blended into the happy and warm atmosphere. With excitement in his heart, he gradually unfolded the lines that he had memorized overnight. Yun Shishir held on to Gong Jie's arm. From the beginning to the end, her smile was gentle. Her gentleness was infectious and made people feel exceptionally warm. The atmosphere at the scene gradually increased. Lu Jinyu smiled and said, "Next, I would like to invite all distinguished guests to witness this most sacred moment together. Let's welcome our groom-to-be." Ceremonial music sounded. Under Yun Shishir's smiling gaze, Mu Yaja slowly walked towards her with flowers in his hands, welcomed by a group of little flower girls. At this moment, Yun Shishir suddenly became uncontrollably nervous. So much so that Gong Jie, who was standing beside her, could feel her extremely stiff hands. "Shao Jie. What should I do? I'm a little nervous," she said secretly, but her face was red and she had some difficulty breathing. Gong Jie did not know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "Why are you nervous? Are you afraid that the groom-to-be will run away at the last minute?" Chapter 1804. Alright. Be good. Don't be nervous. He said gently as he patted the back of her hand to comfort her. It was like a form of encouragement, as though he was telling her not to be nervous because he was here. Yun Shishir looked up and exchanged glances with him. She took a deep breath, and only then did she feel less nervous. In the blink of an eye, Mu Yaja was already in front of her. All the guests stood up and applauded. His group of brothers stood at the side excitedly and whistled. They were obviously very excited. Mu Yaja turned slightly and put a finger to his lips, indicating for everyone to keep quiet. Everyone quietened down in an instant. He turned around and looked at her. His gaze was deep and gentle as he said, "Do you know? I've been waiting for you for 28 years for this moment." Yun Shishir was stunned and looked at him in disbelief. Gong Jia looked at him silently, but his lips curved slightly and he did not say anything. Mu Yaja's thin lips curved into a charming smile, but he asked gently, "Do you believe in love at first sight?" Yun Shishir pursed her lips and nodded. Her eyes were a little hot. "I believe in it." She had always believed that love at first sight was a fated encounter. "At first, I didn't believe in it," Mu Yaja continued, "but when I met you, I felt that you belonged to me. Luckily, it wasn't too late to meet you." "I wasn't late." Yun Shishir was so shocked that she almost suffocated. He rarely said words of love, but today, in front of everyone, he actually said such words of love that made one's heart skip a beat. Yun Shishir's face turned red, but her eyes were slightly moist because of it. Mu Yaja said slowly, "Thank you for making me believe in fate." As soon as he said that, he handed her the bouquet in his hand. Yun Shishir held the bouquet shyly. The next second, Mu Yaja hugged her shoulders affectionately and kissed her delicate red lips tenderly. The guests below the stage were also touched and clapped their hands. Some were so touched that their eyes were wet. The most beautiful love might not be met in the most beautiful years, but it was the company of holding hands for the longest time. It was the most beautiful thing to have until the end. At this moment, Gong Jia quietly let go of his hand and stepped down from the stage. He stood by the side and quietly watched the tender scene on the stage, his gaze gradually deepened. At this moment, he put aside all the feuds and resentment, and offered his most sincere blessings for the person he loved deep in his heart. "Sister, will be happy." As long as she could be happy, he would not regret his decision no matter what. After a short moment of tenderness, Lu Jinyu walked up to the stage and said mysteriously to the guests, "Let's invite our honorable little guest to perform a special performance for everyone." Xiao Yichen walked up to the stage and then walked to the center of the stage. He stood between Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir and suddenly took out a small magic wand. "Next, I'm going to perform a magic trick for everyone." "What magic trick?" Lu Jinyu pretended to be mysterious. Xiao Yichen, however, learned from Yu Yu's arrogance and snorted coldly. "You'll know when I perform it." The guests roared with laughter. They all thought that this little guy, who was as serious as a little adult, was really too adorable. He was pretending to be mysterious. Chapter 1805. The little guy suddenly waved his hands in the air to the music in the hall. He closed his eyes and looked very stylish. He was imitating the world's top magician, as if he was going to perform a mysterious magic trick. However, after waving his hands for a long time, nothing happened. Mu Yaja had no idea that there would be such a trick during the ceremony. He looked confused. Yun Shishir's eyes widened in curiosity as she waited to see what the little lad was up to. Yu Yu, who was standing at the side, fell silent. What kind of clown was this guy trying to pull on stage? Lu Jinyu urged, "Did you conjure anything?" Seeing that nothing happened, Xiao Yichen got a little anxious. His face flushed red as he said, "Don't be anxious. I'm still brewing." As soon as he said that, the guests below the stage burst into laughter again. They were amused by the child's cuteness and playfulness. "This child is so adorable." Yu Yu raised his eyebrows. "Playfulness? In his opinion, Mui Chen was a clown. What kind of trick was he up to? Mui Chen waved it around for a long time, but there was still no movement from it. The guests below the stage burst into laughter again. Mui Chen suddenly felt uneasy and asked Lu Jinyu for help. Uncle Jinyu, what's going on? This isn't how the script was written. However, his voice wasn't soft, and everyone below the stage heard him clearly. This time, he was exposed. Yun Shishir snorted and burst into laughter. Mu Yaja and Yu Yu held their foreheads in tacit understanding, clearly feeling helpless. However, Lu Jinyu said in all seriousness, "Have you forgotten the magic trick that I taught you yesterday?" "That's right. This is the trick. Little fool, Uncle Jinyu will teach you again." As he spoke, Lu Jinyu squatted down and held his little hands. He slowly gestured in the air. Within a few seconds, a flock of snow-white pigeons suddenly flew over from not far away. They circled the ceiling of the venue before flapping their wings and flying away. Xiao Yichen's eyes lit up. This sudden and magical scene surprised all the guests present. However, what was even more surprising was that there was actually a nimble pigeon flying straight towards Mui Chen. The little fellow immediately stretched out his hand, and the pigeon nimbly landed on his finger, standing steadily on his hand. Everyone looked over and saw that there was a rose in the pigeon's mouth. Under the rose's flower path, there were 2 exquisite and small boxes. Mui Chen smiled and wanted to take the box from its little mouth. Unexpectedly, the pigeon had a little temper and turned its head away, refusing to give it to him. Mui Chen panicked and reached out to grab it. Goo! He was pecked by the proud pigeon. Wah! Mui Chen looked angry. This pigeon must have been transformed by Yu Yu. Yu Yu had been implicated even when he was lying down. Mui Chen tried to take it again, but the pigeon pecked his little pink hand again. Mui Chen looked aggrieved and pursed his lips unhappily. Even a pigeon is bullying me? Everyone was amused by the clown's antics. Even Yun Shishir couldn't be bothered to be reserved. She immediately broke into laughter. Little fool. Yu Yu muttered. She ran onto the stage and flicked Mui Chen's little head. How stupid. You can't even handle a little pigeon. Xiao Yichen felt even more aggrieved. Chapter 1806. Everyone was amused by the clown's antics. Even Yun Shishir could not be bothered to maintain her composure as she snickered to herself. Little fool. Yu Yu muttered as he ran to the stage and flicked Mui Chen's head. You're so stupid. You can't even handle a pigeon. Xiao Yichen felt even more aggrieved as he looked at him. He was so upset that he was about to cry. Stupid Yu Yu, why don't you do it if you can? Yu Yu snorted arrogantly, but he still reached out and gently patted the pigeon's head. His gentle touch quickly won the pigeon's trust. Yu Yu smoothly took the box. Then, he turned around and handed the 2 boxes containing the rings to Mu Yaja. Mui Chen was dumbfounded, unable to believe what he had just seen. Yu Yu seemed to have telepathy with the pigeon. That's not fair. It turned out that this was the sacred moment of exchanging rings, and they had purposely used the most innocent and unique way to present it to the public. Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli stood on their tiptoes to look at the stage, curious as to what was in the boxes. From the looks of it, they were probably exchanging engagement rings. Yu Yu beamed. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen wished Daddy and Mommy a blissful marriage for 100 years. We hope that Daddy and Mommy will always love each other and grow old together. This is the gift we prepared for Daddy and Mommy on this important day. His sweet words instantly made the guests below the stage laugh. Some of the guests knew about Mui Chen, but they knew very little about Yu Yu. However, when they saw that Yu Yu and Mui Chen looked alike, they knew that this child was probably Mui Chen's younger brother. It was probably because Mu Yaja was eager to protect his son that he did not expose him to the public too early. Yu Yu had said that this was a secret gift for her parents, but it was not just for show. This pair of engagement rings were personally chosen by Yu Yu and Mui Chen. Of course, this pair of diamond rings was not cheap. However, this was a small token of appreciation from Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen. Yun Shishir did not know about this. However, Mu Yazhe knew about it. Before the engagement ceremony, Yu Yu had secretly found him and told him about it. It turned out that the two little guys wanted to use their private savings to personally choose a pair of engagement rings for them as a token of their sincerity. However, he couldn't let Yun Shishir know about it. Mu Yazhe, on the other hand, laughed. These two were so smart that they even knew to specially choose a gift for the engagement. However, he knew very well that although the two little guys were only 7 years old, they were millionaires and had a lot of private savings. He had a rough idea of Xiao Yichen's private savings. As for Yu Yu, as a core member of Hurricane Group, it was natural that he had a lot of money in his hands. That was a very impressive amount of money. Even Mu Yazhe did not have a direct understanding of his son's wealth. He only knew that Hurricane Group's financial strength was not inferior to Mu Corporation's. In fact, it might even be stronger than Mu Corporation's. Chapter 1807. When Xiao Yichen found out about this, he wanted to join in as well. He also took out his secret stash of money and said that he wanted to choose together with Yu Yu. Hence, the two little rascals started to choose early on. Mu Yazhe was a little surprised. Then, he asked curiously about the design that the two little rascals had chosen. However, at this moment, the two little rascals acted mysteriously and said that they would give him a surprise on the day of the engagement ceremony. Mu Yazhe took the box from him. The moment he opened the box, a dazzling light stole everyone's attention. Following the dazzling light, a pigeon's egg embedded with a pink diamond appeared in everyone's line of sight. It was a pair of engagement rings. On the female ring, there was a rose gold ring holder with a 2-carat pink diamond embedded in it. The unique design and exquisite craftsmanship made it look like a work of the gods. There were a total of 121 exquisite facets. The entire ring was so dazzling that one could feel its unique radiance even from a distance away. It was not to say that the bigger the diamond on the ring, the better it was. On this point, one could not help but praise Yu Yu's taste. Although the diamond was only 2 carats, its purity, color, and craftsmanship were all top-notch. On the other hand, Mu Yazhe's engagement ring was similarly luxurious but reserved. There were no unnecessary decorations or embellishments. It was also a rose gold ring, but the design was extremely novel. The diamond on the male ring was embedded on the reverse side. In the inner part of the ring holder, there was a 20-carat diamond. There was a special saying about this. It meant that the love for her was in the heart and wholeheartedly. Generally speaking, engagement rings were only prepared for the female party. However, Yu Yu felt that since it was an engagement, both her daddy and mommy had to choose a ring. Hence, she chose a ring for Mu Yazhe. Mu Yazhe raised his eyebrows and suddenly smiled. It was obvious that the two little fellows must have spent a lot of effort to choose such a special gift. He smiled at Yu Yu and Mu Yichen to express his gratitude. Then, with everyone watching, he lifted Yun Shishir's hand and slowly put the beautiful ring on her ring finger. At this point, it was like a silent and solemn declaration of his sovereignty. From now on, this woman would be his rightful fiancée. Under everyone's witness. Yun Shishir gently raised her hand. On her slender finger, there was a ring that was so beautiful that it could not be any more dazzling. She smiled and lifted Mu Yazhe's hand. She took out the diamond ring and slowly put it on his ring finger. From this moment onwards, he was officially her fiancé. When Yun Shishir thought of this, countless complicated feelings welled up in her heart. In the end, there was only sweetness and gratitude. Kiss me. Kiss me. Kiss. Kiss. The guests below the stage were infected by the sweet and warm atmosphere. They could not help but encourage and cheer loudly. Chapter 1808. Mu Yazhe, on the other hand, generously hugged her waist and, under everyone's blessings, gently planted a passionate kiss on her delicate red lips. On the stage, as the two of them hugged and kissed, the applause below the stage also erupted without holding back. It was just a light kiss, but he knew when to stop. With that, the engagement ceremony was completed. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen walked down the stage. Mu Yichen looked back 3 times as he walked. Seeing his daddy and mommy blissful moment, he was so happy that he wanted to fly into the sky. However, as he was distracted, he bumped into someone with a plop. Mu Yichen lost his balance and was about to fall backward. However, the man reached out his hand and firmly supported him as he was about to kiss the ground. Thank you. Huh? Mu Yichen was about to turn back to express his gratitude when he looked up and saw Gong Jia, who was wearing a snow-white trench coat, looking down at him expressionlessly. Yu Yu stood beside him and looked at him with disdain. What an idiot. How could you bump into someone when you're walking? I was just looking at daddy and mommy. All of a sudden, Gong Jia bent down on one knee with great interest and looked at him at eye level. His lips curled up slightly as a rare look of calmness appeared on his face. He was very tall, as tall as Mu Yaja. On top of that, he had the natural aura of a king. When he knelt down, it felt as though he was condescending. What's your name? Mu Yichen heard this and smiled confidently. He had inherited Mu Yaja's arrogant demeanor and was natural and unrestrained. My name is Mu Yichen. Do you know who I am? Gong Jia teased him. Mu Yichen tilted his head and smiled. I know. Oh. You're mommy's younger brother, so I have to call you uncle. With that, Mu Yichen placed his hands behind his back and called out obediently, Uncle. Gong Jia was amused by him. Good boy. Mu Yichen said, but I called you uncle. Shouldn't you give me a big red packet? Gong Jia was stunned. He turned his head and exchanged glances with Yu Yu. He furrowed his brows curiously. Is there such a thing? Yu Yu fell silent and then said, yes. Uncle, when in Rome, do as the Romans do and give him a big red packet. Gong Jia. After that, Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir walked off the stage and began to receive the guests' blessings. Soon, the gift that Jiang Shen had prepared was presented before everyone's eyes. It was a 9-tiered cake with 2 exquisite dolls made according to Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja's likeness. The entire cake was exquisitely made, with beautiful decorations and rich colors. One look at it and one couldn't help but drool. It was said that this cake was made by a famous chef and was flown over. Jiang Shen asked eagerly, Sister-in-law, do you like the gift I prepared? Yun Shishir smiled and nodded. I like it. Jiang Shen was instantly elated and his face glowed. Yun Shishir suddenly said softly, but it's not as thoughtful as Jinyu's. Jiang Shen, Lu Jinyu, who was standing at the side, was instantly satisfied. Jiang Shen was in tears. Sister-in-law. I'll give you a big red packet later too. Chapter 1809. Lu Jinyu patted him on the shoulder. See? Red packets may be tacky, but sister-in-law likes them. The rest of the group immediately agreed to prepare a big red packet, which tickled Yun Shishir to no end. The dishes were served one after another at the gala. The guests were holding plates in their hands as they chatted and toasted in front of the buffet table. Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli kept looking around in the crowd and finally spotted Gong Jia's back at a table. They exchanged glances, and Yun Qinli urged, Sis. Go and find out his name. Why do you want me to find out? Because you're dressed up prettily today. Men naturally can't refuse a beautiful woman. Yun Qinli's words were clear and logical. Yun Qingmiao, on the other hand, was secretly delighted. She subconsciously tidied her hair and looked at herself in the mirror before finally walking toward Gong Jia. Gong Jia held his plate and looked at the dazzling array of dishes, but his gaze eventually landed on the dessert section. Like Yun Shishir, he had a sweet taste and especially loved desserts. Therefore, desserts were irresistible to him. Gong Jia had just reached out his hand when a woman's hand suddenly reached out from his right and touched it. His sensitivity jolted and he quickly retracted his hand, frowning in displeasure. He had an extremely serious mysophobia and usually did not allow anyone to touch him. Even if he did, he would wear gloves in advance. He did not like anyone to touch him, except for the people close to him. Thus, while feeling displeased, Gong Jie could not help but look to his side. He saw Yun Qingmiao standing at the side with a red face and looking at him awkwardly. She appeared to be at a loss and looked apologetic. Sorry. I didn't do it on purpose. Gong Jie's face was cold as he scrutinized her from head to toe. His frosty gaze made Yun Qingmiao look even more innocent. I just wanted to try this dessert too. She forced a smile and gave a seemingly reasonable explanation. Unfortunately, unlike other men, Gong Jie's eyes were sharp enough to tell at a glance that this woman was deliberately trying to get close to him, which was why she had played such a small trick. Alas, this method of hitting on him was too boring. He had seen enough. Gong Jie had no lack of women around him. With his handsome appearance and domineering aura, as one of the heirs of the Gong family, his power was shocking. The women around him were like a river, flocking to him like a flock of ducks. There were even some who used unscrupulous means to get close to him and attract him. However, he was used to ignoring women. Unless there was a biological need, women were dispensable to him. He didn't need love. Therefore, he would definitely keep a distance from women unless he had a great need for them. Yun Qingmiao felt embarrassed as she looked at his cold face. This man seemed to be very difficult to approach. He looked noble and arrogant. His face was indifferent, and his eyes were especially cold and sharp like icicles that could pierce one's skin. Gong Jie turned around expressionlessly. Clearly, he had no intention of paying attention to her. Yun Qingmiao was naturally indignant about being splashed with cold water in front of everyone. Thus, she bit her lip, stepped forward, and gently tugged at his sleeve. Chapter 18:10. Gong Jie turned around, raised his hand, and splashed the red wine all over her face. Voila! Yun Qingmiao came back to her senses with the sudden noise, only to realize what the man had done to her. He had splashed red wine all over her face. Drops of red wine slid down her cheeks and eventually drenched her hair and dress. She looked extremely disheveled under everyone's watchful eyes. Gong Jie's cold gaze fell on her. His deep voice was as cold as ice, and his face was expressionless. Don't touch me with your filthy hands, okay? Yun Qingmiao opened her mouth to speak, but when she looked at his cold face, she felt a wave of sadness and even more humiliated. I don't mean anything else. It's just that, Gong Jie impatiently interrupted her explanation. I don't mean anything else. I just find you annoying, so stay away from me. She was so embarrassed that she froze on the spot. Her feet seemed to be nailed to the ground, and she could not take a step forward. The guests looked in her direction, and for a moment, she was standing in the middle of the discussion. Yun Shishir heard the strange commotion and rushed over with her dress in hand. However, she was stunned when she saw the scene. Shao Jie, what's going on? Gong Jie saw her, and the coldness on his face was immediately replaced by a gentle expression. Sis. Shao Jie, what's wrong with her? Yun Shishir glanced at Yun Qingmiao, who was surrounded by the crowd, and then at the mess she was in. She could not understand what had happened. It's nothing. It's just that she touched me with her filthy hands just now. It's really annoying. Gong Jie's voice turned cold as he said, if it weren't for Sis's important day today, she can forget about keeping that hand of hers. His voice was not loud, but it reached Yun Qingmiao's ears clearly. She could not help but shudder at such a cold and frightening statement. It was so cold that it penetrated her heart. These words were not false at all. In the past, at a private party, a woman had tampered with his wine glass in order to get Gong Jie. When the Gong Jie found out, one of her hands was crippled on the spot. Perhaps, on the surface, this man was so docile and well-behaved. This tenderness was only limited to Yun Shishir. Other than her, the Gong Jie treated women rather coldly. This was something Yun Qingmiao had learned firsthand. For a moment, she was embarrassed and aggrieved. She covered her face awkwardly, lifted her messy dress, and hurriedly left. Yun Shishir furrowed her brows, not knowing what to say. Gong Jie saw her eyebrows tightly knitted, suddenly a little nervous. Sister, are you angry with me? How could this be? You don't look well. I'm not angry. Yun Shishir smiled helplessly. But Shao Jie, there are some people that you don't have to care about. Gong Jie said guiltily, I'm sorry. I'll restrain myself next time. Yun Shishir smiled. Alright, good boy. She gently stroked Gong Jie's head, her eyes full of indulgence. Yun Qingmiao returned to her room, and Yun Qinli arrived shortly after, only to see her sister huddled in a corner and crying silently. Sis, are you crying? Chapter 1811. Breaking down, Yun Qingmiao interrupted her and questioned, You're not the one who embarrassed yourself in front of so many guests. Why are you making sarcastic remarks here? Yun Qinli was speechless. Yun Qingmiao was crying so hard that her eyes were red and swollen. The thought of being splashed with wine and humiliated in front of so many people just now filled her with resentment and nowhere to vent. Hence, she did not hold back in her tone toward her older sister. Yun Qinli, however, snapped, I'm not the one who splashed red wine on your face. Do you have to be so angry at me? Yun Qingmiao snorted but did not say anything. She just kept sobbing, clearly feeling aggrieved. Yun Qinli walked to her side, squatted down, and suddenly whispered, I heard that man call Yun Shishir sister earlier. Could they be long-lost siblings? Sister? Yun Qingmiao looked up with reddened eyes in suspicion. He should be Yun Shishir's younger brother. Judging from their appearances, the two of them do look very similar. Why? 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 Yun Qingmiao broke down and wailed. Why does Yun Shishir have so much? She has such a handsome fiancé who is so powerful that he even booked an entire island for her engagement party. Not only that, do you see the accessories she's wearing? Do you see that pair of engagement rings? Do you see that priceless gown she's wearing? Why? Why does she deserve to be doted on like a princess? Yun Qinli frowned and suddenly said, I asked around earlier. This private island isn't booked. Then, what is it? This is one of the private properties under Shishir's fiancé's name. In other words, this island has long been under his name. Yun Qingmiao's eyes widened and she was speechless. Sister, have you heard of Dishing Financial Group? Yun Qingmiao shook her head, baffled by the situation. Never heard of it. What happened? I did some research. If I'm not wrong, Shishir's fiancé is the CEO of Dishing Financial Group. Yun Qinli's eyes were filled with jealousy and envy. So what? Yun Qingmiao, on the other hand, knew very little about Dishing Financial Group, so she did not take her words to heart when she heard them. Yun Qinli raised her eyebrows and looked at her in disbelief. So what? Sister, do you know the status of Dishing Financial Group in the country? Do you know how much Shishir's fiancé is worth? Do you know what it means to be the president of Dishing Financial Group? If Shishir's fiancé is the rumored mysterious young master of Dishing Financial Group, then it can be said that if Shishir marries this man, she will undoubtedly become a phoenix and enjoy a lifetime of glory. Is it that exaggerated? Ha! Don't you know how many real estate companies Dishing Financial Group owns? Whether it's finance, real estate, entertainment, vacations, star-rated hotel chains, medical care. Dishing's Polar Light Group has a lot of investments in every field. It can be said that with this identity alone, Yun Shishir's life, she'll really become a phoenix. As Yun Qinli spoke, her eyes were filled with undisguised jealousy and hatred. Chapter 1812. After marrying him, she would not have to worry about her life's glory and wealth. Among the guests earlier, even the royals and political leaders of other countries, as well as the honorable president, were present. It went without saying how outstanding Mu Yaja's status was. Yun Qinli was extremely envious. However, she could only look on helplessly. In her heart, however, she started to hate Yun Shishir for being such a jinx. In her opinion, a woman with such a background like Yun Shishir was nothing more than a typical Cinderella. Apart from her pretty face, what else did she have? How could she be worthy of Mu Yaja, who was of such a high status? To her, someone like Yun Shishir, who could marry a rich young master with a net worth of tens of millions, was already very enviable. Now, especially after experiencing such a grand and romantic engagement ceremony, her jealousy toward Yun Shishir had seeped into her bones. What right did she have? What right did Yun Shishir have to marry such an outstanding man when she had nothing? How many people were envious of her for marrying into a rich family? What about her? Comparing oneself to others was truly infuriating. Yun Qingmiao was also feeling conflicted. After witnessing the materialistic nature of the big city, she yearned for a life of luxury. Her mood also became impetuous. She desperately wanted to integrate into the upper-class society and befriend an outstanding man like Mu Yaja. She did not have high expectations. As long as it was a man half as capable as Mu Yaja, she would go after him. Alas, she was met with a rebuff from the Gong Jie. Yun Qingmiao felt unbalanced. What right did Yun Shishir have but not her? She did not know what tricks she had used to make a man like Mu Yaja fall head over heels for her. It seemed that she was quite capable. On the surface, she looked pure and untainted, as pure as ice and as pure as jade. Who knew how despicable she was in her bones? She's really the reincarnation of a vixen. I don't know what kind of despicable methods she used, but look at Mu Yaja, he's so obedient to her. Humph. Sis, let's work harder, too. Who knows, maybe we can find a man who's more outstanding than him. Yun Qinli encouraged. Yun Qingmiao narrowed her eyes. Although she sneered without saying a word, the ambition in her eyes could not be concealed. After the engagement ceremony ended, Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja sent off the guests. Not long after, another uninvited guest arrived. When Mu Linfeng and Mu Shumin appeared at the venue, Yun Shishir was caught off guard and stood rooted to the ground. Mu Yaja was not too surprised, however. He knew that this man would eventually show up. With Mu Shumin's help, Mu Linfeng leaned on his cane and looked at the newlyweds with a dark expression. When he saw Mu Yaja hugging Yun Shishir's shoulder, he sized her up with a cold gaze and let out a bone-chilling sneer. The venue was completely sealed off today. Those who could not produce an invitation were not allowed to enter. When Mu Linfeng and Mu Shumin arrived, they were stopped outside the venue because they could not produce an invitation. It was only when the guests had left that he was able to sneak in. Mu Linfeng did not know that Mu Yaja had prepared this engagement ceremony at first. He thought back to when Mu Yaja had said that even if he got married, he would not touch the Mu family's assets, but he did not believe it. Chapter 1813. In the end, when he found out that Mu Yaja had meticulously prepared such a grand engagement party, he was shocked. He knew that it was because of this engagement banquet. Although it was not a high-profile event, many important guests were invited. The sound of the wind naturally fell into his ears. How could he believe it? Engagement party? This rascal did not use any funds from the Mu group. How did he have the ability to organize such a grand engagement party? He was full of doubts as he rushed to the venue with Mu Shumin. However, the scene before him made him turn pale with fright. Without using the Mu group's funds, the engagement party was actually so grand and dignified. At the same time, this surprised him and vaguely made him suspicious. When he wanted to enter the venue, he was stopped at the door. This infuriated Mu Linfeng greatly. Who was he? He was Mu Yaja's second uncle. Why did he need an invitation to attend his nephew's engagement party? How could this be? Mu Linfeng felt like he was going crazy. If it were not for the 2 holes in his nose, he would have been angered to death. He was filled with hatred. Mu Shumin was also rebuffed. She rushed all the way here but was stopped at the door. She had lost all her face. Hence, when she saw Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir smiling as they sent the guests off, she suppressed her anger with great difficulty and did not explode on the spot. When Mu Yaja saw them, he still gave them some face and called out coldly, "Second uncle." However, he ignored Mu Shumin as if she was invisible. Mu Shumin was so angry that she almost vomited blood. Just as she was about to flare up, Mu Linfeng held her down. Only then did she swallow her anger and calm down. "You still have the cheek to call me second uncle?" Most of the guests had left, so Mu Linfeng stood at the door and knocked his walking stick on the floor. He said angrily, "What do you mean by this? What are you trying to do by coming to this island without telling everyone in the Mu family? Are you trying to rebel? Or will you only stop when you anger me to death?" "Second uncle, you're exaggerating." Mu Yaja hugged Yun Shishir tightly, but his expression was indifferent. "Shishir and I should invite guests who sincerely wish us well for our engagement party. As for those who treat us coldly and have bad intentions, there is no need to invite them." Bad intentions. Mu Linfeng frowned deeply, but he was so angry that he laughed. "Rascal, are you trying to anger me to death? Didn't I warn you not to have anything to do with this woman? The sooner you cut off the relationship between you and her, the better. I don't approve of her, so naturally, I won't allow her to take half a step into the Mu family. I've told you this clearly, but you didn't listen, did you?" Gong Jie heard the commotion and walked to the door. However, when he saw this scene, a cold light flashed in his deep eyes. A cold arc appeared on his lips. He walked to Yun Shishir expressionlessly, but his exceptionally cold gaze landed on Mu Linfeng. Mu Linfeng was so angry that he did not notice that the indifferent man standing behind Yun Shishir had completely exploded in anger. "I heard about your engagement from someone else. You hid it from everyone in the Mu family and actually came here to get engaged with this unknown woman? I think you're going to ruin the Mu family's reputation. Shut up. Shut up." Chapter 18:14. Gong Jie and Mu Yaja spoke in unison, almost at the same time. As soon as he said that, the two men exchanged glances. Gong Jie's eyes, however, were filled with inexplicable hostility. He instinctively pulled Yun Shishir aside and looked at Mu Yaja unhappily. His eyes were burning with anger as he pointed at Mu Linfeng and Mu Shumin. "What's going on?" He had thought that this engagement ceremony would receive everyone's blessings. However, these two people had suddenly jumped out to criticize him. Gong Jie sized up the middle-aged man and woman standing in front of him. Based on their words, he could tell who they were. They should be from the Mu family. However, they had been so aggressive from the moment they appeared. They even insulted his sister and called her a wild woman. These words fell clearly into his ears. What wild woman? When Gong Jie heard this, he was filled with anger but had nowhere to vent it. He held her hand tightly, and every joint in his body stiffened. Yun Shishir was shocked by Gong Jie's anger. She could not help but reach out to comfort Gong Jie's shoulder. However, she saw him glaring at Mu Yaja and questioning sternly, "How dare they call my sister a wild woman? Who gave them the guts?" Mu Linfeng was inexplicably furious when he heard this. Where did this arrogant brat come from? How dare he say such things? What did he mean by, "Who gave them the guts"? This man's tone was so arrogant. Did he know who he was shouting at? If he knew, he would probably feel the greatest remorse. Humph. It seemed that this brat was a typical example of a young and impetuous man. He probably did not know who he was offending. Mu Linfeng was so angry that he could not speak. Mu Shumin stood at the side and mocked, "Who is this arrogant brat? Looking at his face, he seems to be this wild woman's biological brother. The sister is shameless and wants to climb up the social ladder. As the brother, he should be shameless and want to use his sister's relationship with the Mu family to climb up the social ladder." Shut up. Mu Yaja's eyes darkened as he reprimanded Mu Shumin. Mu Shumin was so angry that he frowned, and his face twitched. "Yaja! Who are you asking to shut up? I asked you to shut up." Mu Yaja was fuming. He stared at Gong Jie holding Yun Shishir's waist and said coldly, "Let her go. She's my sister, of course, I have to protect her." In the past, she was bullied because I wasn't around. Now, I won't let anyone humiliate her. As he spoke, he did not let go of her hand. He suddenly regretted it. This was only an engagement, and he had to watch as his sister was humiliated. Looking at the situation, it wasn't the first time this had happened. Gong Jia did not dare to imagine how much his sister had suffered when he was not around. What did this mean? This meant that this man could not protect his sister at all. This meant that he did not have the ability to do so. How could he be assured to hand his sister over to this man? He did not even have a reason to convince himself. At the thought of this, Gong Jia shielded Yun Shishir behind him even more. His protective stance agitated Mu Yaja even more. Chapter 18:15. She's not only your fiancée, but she's also my sister. She's my most important family member. Don't forget that I warned you before that if you let my sister suffer even the slightest grievance, I'll flatten the Mu group overnight. The anger that the two men had been suppressing was now unleashed without any restraint. For a moment, the two of them faced each other. Sparks flew, and the surrounding atmosphere turned cold in an instant. Gong Jia curled his lips and tightened his grip on Yun Shishir's hand. With a look of disdain, he said, "Moreover, it's just an engagement. She's not officially your wife yet." Yun Shishir glanced at Gong Jia and then at Mu Yaja. She bit her lip in annoyance and opened her mouth to say something, but Gong Jia said in a low voice, "Sister, don't say anything." Shao Jia, shu. Gong Jia put a finger on her lips, indicating for her to keep quiet. "I'm sorry, sister. I can control my temper in any matter, but not in this matter." Shao Jia, you, listen. Just based on the fact that the Mu family called her a wild woman of unknown origin, I can't sit back and do nothing. With that, Gong Jia looked coldly at Mu Linfeng, but his gaze was full of hostility. Mu Linfeng, on the other hand, was taken aback by his insolent words. "Flatten the Mu group overnight?" Mu Shumin repeated, but she felt that it was very funny. She suddenly let out a cold snort. "You brat, not only do you have a big temper, your tone is also not small. I don't know what you're going to do to flatten the Mu group." Mu Linfeng was stunned and kept quiet. Why did he have a feeling that this man wasn't just spouting nonsense? He glanced at Gong Jia and gradually felt that although this young and arrogant man had an extraordinary aura, he was not a simple person. That was because he saw Gong Jia's eyes. Those were the arrogant eyes of a king. They were insufferably arrogant and unruly. It was as if he could trample the whole world under his feet if he wanted to. Gong Jia sneered and mocked, "Remember, my sister is nobler than you. You're not worthy of my sister." Mu Shumin's eyes were filled with anger, but they were full of mockery. "Not worthy of her? Who do you think your sister is? She's just a lowly commoner. Do you think that you can climb up the ranks and enjoy all the glory and wealth just because you're related to the Mu group? I think you're dreaming." Mu Yaja coldly replied, "Shut up. You have no right to speak here." Scram. Mu Shumin looked at him in disbelief and said, "What did you say? You're asking me to?" "Mu Yaja, I think you've lost your mind, haven't you? This woman is really scheming. I don't know what kind of bewitching potion she used to make you so infatuated with her. How can you side with an outsider? I'm your aunt, but what about you?" He actually dared to say such disgraceful words. "How dare you speak rudely to me for an outsider with ulterior motives? How presumptuous!" Mu Yaja said coldly, "Who's the one speaking rudely? Shishir is my fiancée. In the future, she'll be my only wife. Show some respect." Chapter 18:16. Who else could it be? Mu Shumin sneered, but every word of hers was laced with poison. "Tell your sister, don't be delusional. Don't think that just because she's sucked up to the Mu family, she can really become a phoenix." Yun Shishir clenched her fists, so angry that she was at a loss for words. Gong Jia's heart ached as he hugged her tightly. He was so angry that his face turned cold. He looked up, and his eyes were sharp as he said word by word, "He ba. Make her shut up." A fully armed man behind him took a step forward and slowly closed in on Mu Shumin. Mu Shumin looked at the man who was closing in on her. Seeing that he was fully armed, she inexplicably panicked. "You! What are you doing?" Just as she finished speaking, she felt a black shadow flash in front of her. When she suddenly reacted, that man had flashed behind her like a ghost. His large palm grabbed her chin and forcefully twisted, only to hear a very heavy sound. With a "kacha" sound, her chin was instantly dislocated. The immense pain made Mu Shumin break out in cold sweat. She held her injured chin and stammered, but because of her dislocated chin, she couldn't utter a coherent sentence. The man waved his hand again, and a fiery hot slap landed on her face. Instantly, she couldn't find her bearings. Mu Shumin was also someone who had served in the army for 3 years. She had trained her skills beyond that of an ordinary person. Even so, to her, this man's fighting ability was quite terrifying. She didn't even see how the man made his move. She felt the world spinning around her, and the next second, she was pathetically placed on the ground. This slap almost perforated her eardrums, and there was a loud buzzing sound in her ears, causing her to see black and white in front of her eyes. Even her brain was a little dazed. Yun Shishir was tongue-tied at this sight. She then turned to look at Gong Jia in shock. Mu Yaja's expression changed, but he didn't say a word. In fact, even if Gong Jia didn't do it, he would have done it. This Mu Shumin was really too presumptuous. When Mu Linfeng saw this, he was inexplicably shocked and furious. "Stop! He ba! Continue to hit her." Gong Jia, who was holding Yun Shishir in his arms, casually said this. Mu Linfeng was about to stop him, but the man pushed him aside. Mu Shumin was in so much pain that she was in tears. However, in the next second, she felt her collar was pulled up again. Then, she was ruthlessly slapped, one after another, until she didn't even have the chance to cry out in pain. It was a horrible scene. Although it was a manzazazaz, it was a mercenary. But for mercenaries, there was no such thing. He only obeyed the orders of his employer. Whatever the employer asked him to do, he would do it without hesitation. His execution was top-notch. Mu Linfeng stood at the side, looking anxious and angry. He looked at Mu Yaja, who was watching indifferently from the start, with a hateful expression. "You're just going to watch your aunt be humiliated, aren't you?" Mu Linfeng glared at him fiercely, his voice trembling badly. Mu Yaja sneered. Only in this aspect, he and Gong Jia were on the same side. "Second uncle, you're wrong. Aunt's mouth really needs to be disciplined. Since that's the case, why don't we discipline her properly? Otherwise, he really doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth." Chapter 18:17. Therefore, since someone was willing to help him, why wouldn't he do it? As a nephew, he could not be rude to his aunt, or he would be offending his superior. However, if Gong Jia were to step in, it would be considered as helping Yun Shishir vent her anger. Even if Gong Jia did not step in this time, Mu Yaja would still secretly teach Mu Shumin a lesson. "Stop! Stop hitting him!" Mu Linfeng stomped his feet in anger. Gong Jia remained expressionless as he held Yun Shishir's shoulders and looked coldly at Mu Shumin, who was being punched and kicked on the ground, without any intention of backing down. It was as if this was the only way to appease his unhappiness. Herbo was one of the top experts by Gong Jia's side. As a veteran mercenary of Mercenary Paradise, he had a lot of experience. After 10 years of war, his body was practically made of steel. Even the blood flowing in his body was like a strong liquid made of molten iron. Don't be fooled by the fact that he didn't use much strength in that punch. Even so, with just a few slaps, she would definitely fall apart. Mu Shumin was beaten black and blue, but even so, Gong Jia had no intention of retracting his order. He had decided to beat this woman, who had offended his sister, to death. In front of Yun Shishir, he might be obedient and docile like a sheep without any temper, but other than that, in the eyes of his subordinates, Gong Jia was a rather vicious and merciless person. How vicious and merciless was he? It could be said that he was an extremely vicious person despite his young age. Anyone who angered him would end up in an especially tragic state. Yun Shishir's heart skipped a beat as she watched. Even though she detested this woman for speaking without restraint, Gong Jia's subordinates were still too ruthless in their actions. She could not bear to watch any longer. This was definitely not a joke. If this went on, one could imagine that even if she did not lose half her life, she would have a few broken ribs. But the current atmosphere was too strange. While Mu Yaja remained unmoved, Gong Jia's face remained impassive. In fact, his lips even curled into a sinister smile. Thus, she said fearfully, "Shao Jia, stop hitting me. If this goes on, she'll lose her life." "Sis. You don't have to speak for her. Have you forgotten what she said about you?" Gong Jia said expressionlessly, "How dare this woman humiliate you? I will never forgive her." Mu Linfeng retorted furiously, "How arrogant of you. Do you know who we are? How dare you touch the Mu family? Do you know what kind of disgraceful thing you're doing? If you continue beating him like this, you'll beat him to death. How dare you?" Gong Jia glanced coldly at Mu Linfeng and said nonchalantly, "I want her life. You dare to bully my sister? You deserve to die. Otherwise, do you think that the Gong family can be bullied by any Tom, Dick, or Harry? The Mu family? Who do you think you are? Do you think that the Mu family can do whatever you want and bully others? I'd like to see if the Mu family or the Gong family is more capable." Mu Linfeng was stunned and looked at him in disbelief. The Gong family? What did this man just say? The Gong family? Could he be from the Gong family? Chapter 18:18. The only thing she was concerned about now was that Mu Shumin was about to lose her life. Even though she hated her, today was the happiest day of her life. She did not want to cause any bloodshed because of one person. She would not feel good if they parted on bad terms because of this. Hence, she said in a pleading tone, "Shao Jia, listen to me, okay? At least not here. Today is my engagement day. Don't make such a big fuss. Don't overdo it. Okay?" When Gong Jia heard this, he frowned but did not object forcefully. He took a deep breath and opened his eyes abruptly. With a sharp gaze, he said, "Stop." Almost at the same time he finished speaking, Herba stopped and retreated behind him, ready to receive orders at any time. "You're too heavy-handed. What if you kill her?" Gong Jia reprimanded impatiently. He Ba looked confused. Didn't he ask him to be heavy-handed? Today is my sister's important day. How unlucky would it be if I kill her and get covered in blood? Gong Jia reprimanded again. Whatever Yun Shishir said, it was the truth. According to his original intention, a woman like her should be killed as soon as possible. However, his sister said that he could not kill anyone on such an important day. He immediately changed his stance and stood on the same side as Yun Shishir. The corners of Mu Yaja's eyes twitched fiercely. This Gong Jia was really not an ordinary person. In front of his subordinates and Yun Shishir, he was Satan on one side and an angel on the other. Earlier, he had viciously said that he wanted Mu Shumin's life. Once Yun Shishir spoke, he immediately flapped his wings like an adorable little angel and flew around Yun Shishir. Mu Linfeng walked to Mu Shumin only to see her lying face down on the ground, unconscious. When he turned her over with difficulty, he saw that her eyes were rolled back, her face was covered in blood, and her entire body was limp. Especially her two arms, they were curled up at an extremely twisted angle, as if they had been severely fractured, twisted into a terrifying angle. It was a tragic sight. It was already not easy to keep her life. Mu Linfeng's mind was in a mess. Hence, he did not care much and hurriedly called for people to carry Mu Shumin to the island's infirmary. As he escorted Mu Shumin away, he glared fiercely at Gong Jia with a hostile look. His heart was full of vigilance. This man was simply a terrifying existence. Mu Linfeng snorted coldly and left in a hurry. Mu Yaja expressionlessly ordered people to clean the mess on the ground. Gong Jia was unhappy to see Mu Shumin's infirmary. Hence, he comforted Yun Shishir. Sister. Don't spoil the fun because of her. She bullied you, and I've already ruthlessly retaliated. With today's lesson, she definitely won't let you suffer in the future. Shao Jia, don't you think you've gone overboard? Yun Shishir interrupted him. Gong Jia was stunned and looked at her with a hurt expression. How have I gone overboard? When did you become so violent? Yun Shishir looked at him sadly. She felt that she had inadvertently caught a glimpse of the terrifying and cold expression on his face just now. Somehow, she felt that this younger brother in front of her seemed a little unfamiliar. Gong Jia's gaze was stunned and he was full of grievances. Sister. How can you say that? How am I violent? Chapter 18-19. You're still saying that you're not violent after beating her up like that? But she bullied you. I'm standing up for you. I don't need you to stand up for me. Yun Shishir said angrily, I don't like such a violent Shao Jie. You couldn't even bear to hurt a stray cat in the past, but now you can actually say something as scary as I just want her life. You weren't like this in the past. She didn't think that it was wrong for Gong Jia to stand up for her. However, she felt that Gong Jia had a scary side to him that she didn't know about. In her memory, her Shao Jia wasn't such a ruthless person. Perhaps it was because of some kind of telepathy. She felt that Shao Jia was a little different from the child who always stuck behind her when he was young. Back then, Shao Jia was innocent, cute, and innocent. Sometimes he was mischievous, sometimes he was docile, but at least he was kind. However, the Gong Jia of today, although he was as docile as a lamb in front of her, she realized how scary he was when he accidentally revealed his disguise in front of her. She wasn't a ruthless person. Mu Shumin did go overboard just now, but Shao Jia actually said that he just wanted her life. How could he say such cruel words so easily? Yun Shishir couldn't help but suspect his identity. She suddenly asked suspiciously, Shao Jia, what do you do for a living? Can you tell me? Why do you have such a powerful personal bodyguard? Why are you always so busy, flying all over the world? Why have you become so ruthless, so arrogant that you don't put anyone in your eyes? What is your identity? I have a feeling that you're hiding something from me. Is that so? Gong Jia was stunned. He wanted to say something but stopped himself. He didn't dare to say it. He was afraid that if he told the truth, his sister would be afraid of him and distance herself from him. Yun Shishir saw his evasive gaze and was disappointed. You don't want to be honest with me, do you? Gong Jia said hesitantly, Sis, don't tell me, sis, don't let your imagination run wild. Gong Jia was a little flustered as he comforted her. Don't let your imagination run wild, okay? I didn't mean to hide it from you, it's just... Just what? Yun Shishir narrowed her eyes. Shao Jia, I know I shouldn't interfere with your personal life. But there are some things that I really don't understand. I have a feeling that you and I are different. I'm like a commoner, but you give people the feeling that you're the supreme ruler who controls life and death. When she stood beside him, she would often feel suffocated by his domineering aura. Gong Jia remained silent, unsure of how to come clean with her. She smiled helplessly and casually said, Since you're willing to be honest and want to hide it from me, then continue hiding it from me. After saying that, she suddenly let go of his hand. Feeling nervous, the man reached out to grab her hand. But she coldly avoided him. Gong Jia looked at her with hurt, but he could only watch helplessly as she held onto Mu Yaja's arm and slowly walked away. Mu Yaja looked at him coldly and then, as if to provoke him, slowly walked away with a playful smile. Gong Jia was so angry that he clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. Do you think I should be honest with her about my identity? Chapter 18:20. Yu Yu rolled his eyes. He took a sip of his cola and suddenly leaned forward mysteriously. He lowered his voice and said, "Do you know why I hid the fact that I'm in the hurricane group from Mommy?" "Why?" Gong Jia asked, puzzled. Yu Yu sniffled and said pitifully, "If Mommy found out that I was involved in smuggling, she would beat my ass." He sighed and shook his head. "That's why I tried so hard to hide it until now. Even Mommy doesn't know my identity. In Mommy's eyes, I'm an innocent and cute child. So, I'll play this role well. If she finds out that I've been doing these things behind her back, I'll definitely be beaten up badly." Gong Jia was utterly impressed. "You were able to hide it from her for so long without being found out." "That's because I'm good at acting." Yu Yu was quite proud. Gong Jia was silent. He drank the dry red wine in his glass and said dejectedly, "She said that I've changed. She said that I've become more ruthless." "Yu Yu, is that true?" Yu Yu sipped on his cola and gave him a look, telling him to figure it out for himself. Gong Jia frowned. "What do you mean by that look?" "I think Mommy's right. Uncle, you're really ruthless." Yu Yu spread his hands and pretended to be innocent. "How am I ruthless?" Yu Yu rolled his eyes and said, "Haha. Hanging a pirate on a cargo ship under the scorching sun for 3 days and drying him alive. Only my dear uncle would do such a heartless thing." Gong Jia was silent again. "He hijacked my cargo ship and shot one of my crew members. Leaving him under the scorching sun for 3 days is considered a light punishment. Then using a live hostage as a gun to practice shooting, only you would do that, right?" Yu Yu asked again. Gong Jia defended himself. "That hostage was the leader of a terrorist organization and wanted to assassinate me." Yu Yu was speechless. Gong Jia felt good about himself and said, "Actually, I feel that I'm very kind." Yu Yu looked at him as if he was looking at a hopeless idiot. "Uncle, I think your worldview might be a little different from Mommy's." "Why?" Yu Yu seriously. "Look, in Mommy's worldview, killing, arson, smuggling, armed, these people are defined as bad people." Gong Jia nodded thoughtfully. "But there are so many options, how many of them do you have? Have you killed anyone?" "Yes." "Have you set fires?" "I bombed the presidents." Do you smuggle? Do you have an armed group?" Yu Yu shrugged helplessly and then laughed. "Look. In Mommy's heart, you're a heinous villain." Gong Jia was instantly disheartened and felt that there was nothing left to live for. "Also, Mommy might be angry because she feels that you're hiding something from her. She actually cares about you a lot and wants to integrate into your world, but you seem to be deliberately hiding things from her, making her feel lonely. After all, Mommy's heart is more sensitive and fragile." "Then what should I do? Should I tell her everything?" Yu Yu said, "Then let her know that you've killed people, set fires, and committed all kinds of crimes?" Gong Jia was speechless. He couldn't tell her the truth. Chapter 18:21. If you tell Mommy the truth, she will be frightened. If she finds out that the brother she has been taking care of since young is such a scary person. TSK TSK TSK. Yu Yu was gloating over his brother's misfortune. "Then help me think of a solution and tell me how to deal with this," Gong Jia ordered. Little Munchkin said proudly, "I won't do it. Do as you see fit. You have to deal with your own problems, don't push it to others." With that, he stood up and was about to leave. Gong Jia, who was behind him, suddenly flashed an evil smile. "You want to leave?" "Sure. My dear little nephew, I don't mind dragging you down with me. When the time comes, I'll tell your mommy that you're in the same organization as me, and you've also killed people, set fires, and even hacked into the Pentagon's defense network to smuggle firearms." Guess what her expression will be like? Yu Yu paused and turned around, giving Gong Jia a murderous look. "How dare you? Do you think I won't?" Gong Jia was not afraid of the threat in his eyes. Yu Yu clenched his fists. He could not understand Gong Jie's thoughts and did not know if he would betray him. Hence, he took a deep breath and walked back to the table, forcing himself to sit down in front of him. Gong Jie poured him half a glass of Coke gently and pushed it in front of him. If I have to think of a solution, why don't we not deal with it? What? Deal with it coldly. Don't mention this matter. When this is over, make up an identity for her. Mommy will believe you. Gong Jie was speechless. So simple. What else can we do? Mommy can be smart sometimes, but most of the time, she is very stupid. Gong Jie nodded thoughtfully and suddenly looked at Yu Yu with a deep gaze. Yu Yu. Yes? Can I ask you a question? What is it? Gong Jie suddenly approached him, stared into his eyes, and asked in a deep voice, Are you willing to go to the headquarters with me? My father wants to see you. Yu Yu's expression froze as his eyes widened in astonishment. Your father wants to see me. According to his position, he is your superior. According to seniority, you should call him grandfather. Yu Yu frowned but did not say a word. Suddenly, he asked curiously, Why does he want to see me? As the #1 genius of the Hurricane Group and one of the developers of the Heavenly Eye, I'm naturally curious about your true face. He has already mentioned this to me for a long time, but he always considered that you might not be willing, so he never put it on the agenda. It just so happens that he wants to ask for your opinion. Yu Yu fell silent again. Gong Jie asked, Why? You don't want to? No. Yu Yu shook his head and said truthfully, Before I knew he was my grandfather, I had always wanted to see him. In my heart, he is a very powerful paragon. He was able to develop the Hurricane Group into such a magnificent territory. He is a genius leader and the person I admire the most. After a pause, he suddenly laughed and said, But after knowing he is my grandfather, I am not so impulsive about wanting to see him. Why? Yu Yu said truthfully, Because I don't know what identity I should use to see him. Gong Jie was speechless. Chapter 1822. Unless Mommy is willing to return to the Gong family. If that's the case, then I will be willing to see him. Gong Jie slowly poured himself a glass of red wine. His slender fingers gently caressed the rim of the glass as if deep in thought. Yu Yu pursed his lips and smiled helplessly. No matter what, he would always be on the same side as Mommy. If he did not care about Mommy and returned to the Gong family with Gong Jie, then Gong Jie's father would be able to recognize him at first glance based on his facial features. When that time came, he would find out that it was Mommy. If it caused Mommy trouble, that would not be something he wanted to see. Gong Jie sized him up and suddenly remembered that Yun Shishir was unwilling to return to the Gong family because of Mu Yaja. He felt wronged. He asked, Yu Yu, why do you think a woman can sacrifice everything for love? Yu Yu was stunned. The corners of his eyes twitched violently as he silently complained, Uncle, I'm your nephew, not an encyclopedia. You don't have to ask me everything, do you? Because Uncle feels that my little nephew knows everything from heaven to earth. Since you're so smart, you'll definitely be able to give me an answer. Gong Jie lazily rested his chin on his hand and looked at him silently. Yu Yu was silent. Then, he calmly stirred the cola in his glass. He bit the straw and blew on it until it bubbled. He took a sip and said vaguely, Because we have different views on love. Love, to a man, may only be a part of a man. But to a woman, it may be her everything. When Gong Jie heard this, he was shocked. He sighed and said, Yu Yu, are you a relationship expert? You've said the essence of it in one sentence. Yu Yu looked at him with disdain and said coldly, I can't be considered a relationship expert. This is what I've read in books. Gong Jie's lips curled into a smile. He felt that this little nephew of his who was still childish but spoke with such sharp words was too cute. I still can't understand women who see love as their everything. Yu Yu glanced at him from the corner of his eyes and asked nonchalantly, Uncle, have you been in a relationship before? Gong Jie frowned. Why are you asking this? Asking about your relationship history. Why, can't I ask? I don't have a relationship history. Gong Jie replied. Yu Yu clicked his tongue and said disdainfully, no wonder. So you've never been in a relationship? Uncle, have you been with a woman? What? That means, a relationship between a man and a woman without a romantic relationship. For example, a spiritual partner? You. Pfft. Gong Jie couldn't help but spit a mouthful of red wine on Yu Yu's face. Yu Yu shut his eyes abruptly. His rosy cheeks were flushed red, and he instantly looked a little disheveled. His long and thick eyelashes, in particular, were stained with the wine. His delicate brows furrowed slightly in displeasure, but he managed to keep his emotions under control and did not explode. Gong Jie looked at him blankly and said apologetically, Yu Yu, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. Yu Yu didn't want to bother with him. He took a warm handkerchief and carefully wiped his face clean. Chapter 1823. Gong Jie's mind was in a mess. Please, it wasn't that he didn't pay attention to his manners, it was that he couldn't tolerate it. No. Stop. Okay. What was a physical relationship? Who had ever seen such words coming out of the mouth of a 7-year-old child? Had anyone ever seen it before? Therefore, he was caught off guard and was caught off guard. This child was really a mischievous child. Gong Jie held back his laughter and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What do you mean by a physical relationship? What do you mean by, your little brain can't think? A physical relationship is a relationship between a man and a woman that is maintained purely from a biological point of view. If I were to use a simpler term to describe it, it would be, bed partners. Gong Jie was dumbfounded. Yu Yu tilted his head elegantly and asked calmly, why? Am I wrong? What nonsense is your little brain thinking about all day? How do you even know about this? Cough, cough. Gong Jie was once again flustered. He felt that it was a little too far-fetched. Yu Yu smiled and said, I've been studying psychology and sociology recently. Yes, that's what I've been studying recently. Gong Jie lectured him sternly, it's too early for you to be concerned about this. I've always been so ahead of myself. It's good to spend more effort on your studies. Gong Jie smiled and said, don't look at this messy psychology. Have you revised your homework? Yu Yu curled his lips in disdain and said casually, I've already prepared my homework for the third-year science course in high school. So, it's really boring normally. Gong Jie was still dumbfounded. You're lying. How was that possible? He was only in elementary school at this age. How could he understand such profound knowledge in high school? He had already prepared for it. That was so unbelievable. Gong Jie took a deep breath and found it hard to believe. Yu Yu said disdainfully, these questions are very simple. I'll know them after flipping through the books once. As for the humanities, I'm not interested. Anyway, it's all rote memorization. I'm not interested in preparing for it. Gong Jie, no wonder this child's EQ was so high. It turned out that he spent all his extra time studying psychology. That was too scary. When his sister gave birth to him, she must have had a genetic mutation to give birth to such a shocking genius. I'm guessing that you've never been in a relationship before, mommy's actions. In fact, women were more emotional creatures, and most of them lacked a sense of security. That's why they values their families as family. Actually, I understand mommy. Mommy Tess right, mommy tease her s hurt t she test, t. Therefore, in order to protect her family, she did not hesitate to give up everything, t. Even if I told you, you wouldn't understand. You don't understand women. You make it sound like you know a lot, Gong Jie said indignantly. Mommy and I depended on each other since we were young. I'm the one who understands mommy the most. Don't I have the right to speak? Gong Jie was speechless. I'm talking to a cow. I don't even have a woman at my age. You won't understand even if I explain it to you. Yu mocked.